Okay, hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to my channel, Holy Humanist. I'm very excited for you all to be here today because we have the beginning of something very, very exciting happening. So I've got a very, very special guest with me today, Lloyd de Jong, which I really hope I've said his last name correctly. But yeah, so without further ado, I'm going to invite Lloyd onto the stream and he'll give you a quick introduction as to who he is. And then I'll also share his YouTube channel with you guys because Lloyd is doing absolutely incredible work. Putting the spotlight on these areas of Islam and Islamic history and pre-Islamic history that kind of weren't looked into, and nobody's done a deep dive to this extent and then connected the dots, so to speak. So going by that same kind of reasoning and wanting to expose elements of Islam that, myself as an ex-Muslim, we don't really go into much. We're kind of just dealing with source material. And me particularly, I deal with how it affects and impacts women and the status of women in Islam. So I thought today we'd kind of delve into the historical side of things some more, because I personally am so fascinated by this sphere of history in general and what happened and how it lent its beginnings to Islam as we know it today. So the presentation today is basically going to be setting the scene, because this is one in a number of presentations because it is such a big topic to unravel, as I'm sure Lloyd will tell us. So today's presentation is going to be primarily to set the scene, introduce you to some major events, to the languages, to the geography, what was going on, and basically how Proto-Islam begins to take shape in Arabia. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I will, and you learn as much as I'm about to learn, because this is purely educational for me as well. And we have kind of decided to make this a 2-hour stint. So we encourage that if you have any questions on whatever we're talking about in that moment, then feel free to send them our way so we can address them in the moment. And if they are slightly more in-depth questions, we might save them for the end if we've got some time, but we're not doing a separate Q&A at the end. So keep your questions coming if you have any when and as we go through the presentation. Right, okay, I've spoken enough. Today, Lloyd is going to be hosting way more than me, and I'm just going to be chiming in wherever I feel the need and probably annoying him and picking his brain with some questions. So without further ado, Lloyd, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you for the opportunity. I'm really glad to be here, Nuria.
No problem at all. And I know we've obviously just had a couple of discussions off air. So I've started to kind of, get to know you a bit better. But for my audience and for whoever's watching, would you mind just giving a quick introduction as to just your background, who you are, and why you're doing what you're doing?
Certainly, yeah. Okay. My name is Lloyd de Jong. I'm South African. I live in Warsaw, Poland. I lived 11 years in the Middle East. I've traveled extensively across the Middle East. And for a significant portion of that time, I worked in national defense. So I was involved in engineering and consulting, designing long-range wide area surveillance systems to protect borders and critical national infrastructure from sabotage, from terrorism. So basically preventing groups like Al-Qaeda, ISIS from attacking critical resources like airports, oil pipelines, things of that nature, and basically destroying them, even military bases, military targets, destroying them, killing people. So I traveled across the Middle East. I consulted and worked with government, industry, law enforcement, and military. So I was very intimately involved with what was going on in the Middle East. Very much intimately involved with the culture. I've traveled extensively. And a lot of these experiences left me scratching my head, and I wanted to understand the culture. And it took me a while to understand, and I started to. And then the one experience that changed me was I studied counterterrorism, and on the course we did secular terrorism, sort of terrorism for political reasons. Then we did a module on religious terrorism, and they were happy to talk about Hindu terrorists, and then we spoke about Christian terrorists, all those evil Christian terrorists. And then when it came to Islamic terrorism, it was like, oh well, minor issue. Let's just skip over that. Moving on to the next topic.
Right.
And I was like,
Hold up.
can we talk about this? And the staff and the faculty were terrified of discussing the topic. And there were numerous students that were there, it seemed, specifically for the purpose of derailing any discussion, crying Islamophobia, and then complaining and reporting anyone who wanted to raise this issue to the faculty.
Right.
And the faculty were terrified into submission. And eventually, a cache of documents was discovered in Raqqa, basically they're the indoctrination manuals.
Right.
And so the ISIS manuals that I found, that I had access to at the time, they were all standard Orthodox Sunni Islam. It wasn't anything strange. And I looked deep into this, and I discovered one of their main documents, one of the books that they worked with, was a Sharia manual called Reliance of the Traveler. And I started to read into it, and I started to study, and I became very familiar with Islamic law, the fiqh, the Sharia. And I got banned from the class when I introduced this information that was seized in Raqqa to the class.
Wow.
And that
Wow.
set me off.
Wow. This was, I mean, you've lived an extremely, I'd say, well, just eventful life. And is it fair to say then, Lloyd, like based on all your experience, you've spent time and lived amongst various kinds of Muslims across the Middle East, and
Yeah,
you
I've spent
seeing,
significant time.
wow, okay. Yeah. So, I mean, thank you so much for that introduction. I do want to just point out Lloyd's channel. Sorry. This is Lloyd's YouTube channel. Let me click on the video link here. So please do go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. By the end of this stream, I'm sure you would have. As you can see, Lloyd is unpacking various like spheres of pre-Islam, the Islamic Sharia, fiqh, as he mentioned. So there's a lot going on here. The Muslim Talmud that really deep dives into Sharia law in a way that myself as a lay Muslim, but even most people who think they know Sharia, it really, really makes you think again. So yeah, his channel is literally his name, Lloyd de Jong. Please go ahead and subscribe to that.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
No worries at all. So, Lloyd, as I said, the floor is pretty much yours. So you can steer this entire stream, to be honest, and I'll just kind of be here chiming in. But just before we get started, I just want to highlight why we are discussing this, because obviously when we've talked off air as well, we discussed like how some of these elements might be considered quite conspiratorial amongst Muslims and also amongst ex-Muslims alike. So right at the beginning of the show, before we've even started, Jojo is a regular viewer. But Jojo says, I respect you and everyone who wants to help people, but this moon otheism is nonsense. I say it as an ex-Muslim. And then I just want to show the varied opinion. Rhiannon Sese, sorry if I've mispronounced your name, says, I'm also an ex-Muslim. There is a lot of truth behind it, to be honest, if it's about what I think it is. So as you can see, there is already that kind of divide, and what we're delving into, is it actually, are the links there? Can we make a justifiable connection? And is there, does it have weight to it enough for us to make these links that we're making? So if you wanted to quickly shed some light on that, and then the floor is all yours.
I think the fact that I'm here, that you invited me onto the channel, is testament to the fact that at least you think it is credible, that it is credible and worthy of presenting, that you don't think it's crackpot.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think you have a fair degree of discernment. I've watched several of your videos now, and you wouldn't bring me on if you thought that I was going to embarrass you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate, well, again, your research and your knowledge speaks for itself. So it's not even about, it's literally hard hitting. And that's why I'm saying, if you think this, Jojo, at this instance, please let us know what you think at the end of this stream, and most definitely at the end of the entire series.
I will be introducing, also, this is information from the South. We're talking, most research at the moment into early Islam, the Islamic origins, tends to focus around the 6th and 7th centuries. I go back well before that, hundreds of years, maybe 1,000 years prior to that. Thank you, clear as mud. And I focus on the southern area, Yemen and Ethiopia. So I'll start with Ethiopia, then we'll move to Yemen very rapidly and stick with Yemen for most of this presentation. But also, so everyone's focusing on the north to places like Petra, Mesopotamia, Iraq, Turkey. Most of what I do focuses on the south, on the areas that were very close to that region. Historically, but also I look at archaeology, I look at the language, we look at lots of archaeological research. So and I will tie this together. So it's a lengthy series, but yeah, I think the evidence is clear. And another thing is that I've covered this within my discussions on Sharia, but Islamic law makes it legal. It's not only legal, it is moral to lie. Islamic law allows Muslims to lie. Now, this is not to say that all Muslims are lying, and this is not to say that Muslims are knowingly lying, but also this makes it legal for the imam to lie to Muslims, because as long as they keep the peace, any lie that they tell is not considered a lie; it's considered righteous and moral. So there's lots of confusion, and this is a subject we can cover another day in depth.
Sure.
But unfortunately, so it really, so hence I'm going to be relying on numerous, and also I will share all of my resources. All my resources, I'll share the link. I'll provide that so you can make it available. All the resources that I'm using, everyone can go and have a look for themselves. I
Yeah.
have an archive of over 1,200 books that I use.
Well, thank you, Lloyd. We really appreciate that because, again, we're not here to say, believe us and trust every word we're saying here. Go ahead and look into it for yourselves. That's literally what we're encouraging. And I think even just us having this conversation is already starting to, Jojo's now said, yeah, in a way, maybe. Yah from Christianity has the same name as the Egyptian moon god Yah, and Allah comes from the Jewish god Yah. So, yes, sorry. Well, this is all the kind of stuff we're going to unpack because Lloyd has so many more connections and links to draw here. So thank you, Jojo, for reconsidering your position and being willing to be open to this knowledge. So yeah, let's do this.
Okay, well, yeah, so let me share my present. Let me just start by sharing the presentation. I may as well just take it from the top.
Sure.
And as you said, we'll take questions. We'll meander a little bit.
Yeah. So guys, feel free to send your questions through on if you have a question as and when Lloyd is presenting on a specific issue or topic.
Okay, yeah, can everyone see my screen? So I should be sharing now.
Yes, here we are.
Okay, here we are. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you again, Nuria, for inviting me. Hi to all those guys who know me in the chat. Appreciate your attendance. Right, have a look. This is called Islamic monotheism. I know this has been an issue, very contentious issue since the 90s when this theory was floated, but we're going to go into far more depth than you may be familiar with. And we're going to talk about the moon gods of Babylon because early Islam, Proto-Islam, that region before the birth of Muhammad, they worshipped a pantheon of gods, and this pantheon of gods happened to be a clone of the Babylonian pantheon of gods. So we'll be focusing on Yemen mostly. We will cover Ethiopia. We'll be talking about Abraham because Islam claims to be of the religion of Abraham. Now, if you look at the biblical story, Abraham, before he started to worship Yahweh, Abraham was a Sabaean. He was a moon worshiper. And the Sabaeans are from Yemen. So the Queen of Sheba, the people of the Queen of Sheba, Saba. So he was a moon worshiper. And Abraham was one of these people who worship the moon. So the original, and since in Islam they reject Christianity, they reject Judaism, and they wanted to find the original religion of Abraham. Well, the original religion of Abraham was moon worship.
And don't they also reject? Is that the same Sabians that's referred to in the Quran at least 3 times?
There's two. So it's a little unclear in the Quran because you have the Sabians and you have the Sabaeans. They're two different groups.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of a difference. We will cover that. We will get into that in depth. So yeah, but also you'll see here the symbol, this crescent and star. The star is often round without the spikes on the star because that's the star Venus. Okay, you can see this symbol goes way back. And I know Muslims like to say that the Turkish did it in 1843, it became the symbol of the Ottoman Empire. No, the Turks were using this symbol pre-BC. They were using this in the 1st century. They were using it up to several hundred years before Jesus was born. So this symbol goes way back in Turkey. But so anyway, thank you guys. Let's all begin. So just to give a brief summary of the overall thesis, we're going to be looking at archaeology, history, language, as well as the Islamic sources. Right? We're going to be looking at Proto-Islam and how it is traced to Yemen and to Ethiopia and into their pagan roots. Right? They had the same religion, they had the same pagan Babylonian roots. Proto-Islam is based on pagan moon god worship, so that's the overall thesis here, and I'll be discussing that in depth. The Arabian gods were copies of the Babylonian, Sumerian, and Canaanite gods. They were all effectively the same pantheon of gods. Right? As we know, there's no early evidence of Mecca in Arabia. There is
Correct.
evidence for many Meccas in Yemen, and the Arabian pagan god, the main Arabian pagan god, was called Makkah.
Wow.
Right?
How insane is that?
Correct. And Makkah was also known as the Babylonian moon god Sin, the main god of Babylon, the moon god. And so yeah, so let's so let's start here. So this is where I start. Hopefully, this is a slower introduction. So just setting the scene, and in the second and third presentation, this really starts to pick up pace.
Yeah.
But we're talking about Yeha. It's a Sabaean or Sabah kingdom site in Ethiopia. Yeha is a Bronze Age site near Axum in Ethiopia. It is the largest archaeological site in the Horn of Africa, which shows African contact with South Arabia. As I said, most research focuses on the north and on the east, northern Iraq, and so on, and Turkey. However, very, very little work has been done looking at Yemen and looking at Africa. So now Sabah is the historical Sabaean kingdom of Sheba from the stories of Solomon and the Queen
Queen
of
Sheba.
Sheba. Correct.
From the Quran itself, yeah.
Discusses that legend, yeah. So Yeha is the precursor to the Ethiopic Aksumite Empire, which interestingly enough was one of the four greatest empires of its day, and few people have even heard of it. These people were competing with the Greeks, the Romans, the Chinese. They were on the same par as
Wow.
these major empires, but you've barely heard of them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So this site was established in the 8th century BC. It includes a temple, an elite residence called the Great Belgebri, and some shaft tombs cut into rock. And the Sabaeans were a Semitic people from an Arabian kingdom in western Yemen. So actually, let me bring up a map just so I can orient people a little more closely to this.
Sure.
So this is the region that we are referring to here. Right, so this is what we are referring to here. This is Ethiopia. So this is Aksum here. This used to be, obviously, historically, things have changed over time, but this is in the north of Ethiopia, just across the strait from
Wow.
Arabia.
Yeah.
And this is very near the Horn of Africa. So we'll come back to the maps on regular occasions. So now
Yeah.
the empire flourished from the 8th century BC to about 275 AD. They were conquered. They did come back in spurts, but the general culture continued for a long time after that. And this temple was known as El Makkah Temple.
Wow. Okay.
Now, what is interesting to note is that the Yemeni Arabic has this Q sound, Makkah, whereas in Arabian Arabic, it becomes a hard K. So
Yeah.
Makkah becomes Makkah.
Right.
You may have heard of a small town in Arabia called Makkah,
Yeah, I've heard of it before. Yes. Oh
right?
my gosh.
So this was the Makkah temple. Now, what is interesting is this was only one of many Makkah temples. These are two more Makkah temples right here.
And
Marib,
sorry,
the old
Lloyd, even
capital of
just
Yemen.
immediately straight away geographically, this makes so much more sense, doesn't it? From if you're looking at Saudi Arabia today and to what's happening in this region, then like where you say obviously Petra is like a strong candidate according to some people, but you know what's happening up in Iraq and stuff. This I mean, even if you look at into the Islamic African slave trade, it all starts to make more sense.
You'll notice that the very same criteria that make Petra an acceptable candidate apply to Yemen, and possibly even more so.
Most definitely. I agree.
So we'll look a little bit more into that. We'll touch on all of that. So there were several Makkah temples, major pilgrimage temples in this part of Yemen and Western Arabia, right here, southwestern Arabia. The capital at one point was here in Marib. Okay, it was also known as the throne of the Queen of Sheba, the Mahram Bilqis, right?
Mhm.
And so these are two of them. There was a third one close by. So these were three of the major Makkah temples right here in Arabia. As you can see, Mecca is up here, and then you've got this area right here. This Najran was at one point a Christian location, but it had the interesting name of um, of Arabia Heresium Ferax, which was Arabia, the bearer of heresies. So what
Oh,
happens is Christianity. So oddly enough, Christianity, and this is all important, we'll tie it in. Christianity came to Ethiopia very early on. So from the 2nd century, there was already an established Christian presence. However, at one point, these guys controlled all of Arabia. which includes that influence up to Mecca. So they brought their Christian influence, even in Ethiopic Bible, much earlier than was expected. And this was one of the hotspots where Christians would go and do their pilgrimage. However, heretics, major heretics, also gathered here. Gnostics also gathered here. There was a huge
Right.
fight to establish orthodoxy here.
Right. Okay.
Right, so here we go. So now you've got Aksum and you've got Yeha, right? Then you've got various Al-Makka temples, multiple temples in this region, and that's Najran, and of course Mecca is just up here. All right, so I'll continue. So let's have a look at the Sabaeans. So the people of the kingdom of Sabba, the kingdom of Sheba. So Muslim writer Muhammad Shukri al-Alusi, I believe he's 10th century, he compared their religious practices to Islam in his Bulugh al-Arab fi Ahwal al-Arab. He said that Arabs during the pre-Islamic period, during the Jahiliyyah, used to practice things that were included in the Islamic Sharia.
Oh my word.
They, for example, did not marry both a mother and her daughter. They considered marrying two sisters simultaneously to be the most heinous crime. They censured anyone who married his stepmother. They made the major Hajj and the minor Umrah pilgrimage to the Kaaba. They performed the circumambulation around the Kaaba tawaf. They ran 7 times between Mount Safa and Marwa. They threw rocks and they washed themselves after sexual intercourse. Is that familiar?
Yes, insanely. Oh my days. That is literally the
And this is the
entire Hajj.
summary.
Yeah, exactly. That's literally Hajj, the mini version Umrah, the washing yourselves after sexual intercourse. It's in so many of the hadith, exactly what and how many times you should wash and all that. This is literal Islam today.
Correct. And these were pagan Babylonian moon god worshippers. So
Wow.
they also gargled. They sniffed water up into their noses. They clipped their fingernails, removed all pubic hair, and performed ritual circumcision. They also cut off the right hand of a thief and they stoned adulterers. Sounds a little
Again,
familiar too.
yeah, modern Islam, literally, that's how you do wudu or, the ablution before you pray. And that's still a punishment in the Sharia.
Correct. Yeah, we can do Sharia another time, but yeah, I can certainly. So now the Sabaeans have 5 prayers, similar to the 5 prayers of the Muslims. Others say they have 7 prayers, 5 of which are comparable to the prayers of the Muslims. With regards to time, that is morning, noon, afternoon, evening, and night. And the 6th is at midnight, and the 7th is at forenoon. So some sects of the Sabaeans had 5 prayers.
Yeah.
Not all of them. Some had 7, but some had 5. 5 prayers. Do you know of another religion that has 5 prayers? I can't think of one right now.
Don't know. I believe it might be the one I came from, Islam. But also, Lloyd, the even if it's 7, that's really interesting as well because in Islam, technically, if you want to be that extra good Muslim, you can pray. The further one, it's called Tahajjud. It's even before Fajr, the sunrise one, and then you can pray one after Isha as well, which is either 5 or 7 if you think about it.
Yeah.
Madness. Okay.
Yeah, so it is their practice to pray over the dead without kneeling down or even bending the knee. They also fast for 1 lunar month of 30 days. They start their fast at the last watch of the night and continue till the setting of the sun. Some of their sects fast during the month of Ramadan. Heard that name somewhere before. They face the Kaaba when they pray. They venerate Mecca and believe in making pilgrimage to it. They consider dead bodies, blood, and the flesh of pigs as unlawful. They also forbid marriage for the same reason as do Muslims.
Oh my gosh. Again, Islam today. That's it still.
Yeah.
They have assimilated this very well into current Islam as we know it. It's all still there. And it just so Ramadan, that being a sacred month, pigs being unlawful, all of this is pre-Islamic. It's not it's and it's from this, how do I pronounce this one right without alluding to the other ones? Sabaeans?
Sabaeans, yeah. Sabaeans.
Sabaeans.
Yeah, the other ones are Sabians. Let me just bring up this. So, yeah, the other group would be Sabians. Oops, Sabians. Yeah,
Right.
these guys are Sabaeans. So we're talking about
Okay.
Sabaeans right now from Yemen. The Sabians are in the north. The Sabians are both groups. Okay, this group is mentioned in the Bible. They're part of the biblical history. They're enemies of the people of the people of Israel, right? They're enemies of the people of Israel, and they actually are servants of Satan within the biblical story. And then the Sabians are what we call the Mandaeans today. They're Gnostics.
Okay.
They detest Jesus. They hate Jesus. They revere John the Baptist, and they follow the prophet Enoch. They call him
Right.
Enosh. But there's a longer story there. But that's yeah.
Sure.
So also just don't want. I saw a comment in the chat. Darse, Atheist Republic of Cape Town, Jamio. But that's Afrikaans. So yeah, but it's also important that you don't mishmash everything so that there's no distinctions between them, because there are distinctions to be made. It's very important to also recall to think about the distinctions, not just the similarities. So, okay, let's move on. So in Bulgharab fi blah blah blah, we read the 4 sacred months, Rajab, Dual Qadda, Dual Hijjah, and Muharram, had been considered sacred during the pre-Islamic period, the Jahiliyyah. There were raids, there was taking revenge, well, chaos, war, fighting, and disputes were forbidden during them. If a man met his enemy who killed his father or brother, he would not quarrel with him during the sacred months. The people were under
Whoa.
restriction not to fight or make raids and had to remove their spearheads as a sign that they would avoid fighting at all costs. And obviously, Islam borrowed the hallowing of these months from pre-Islamic Arabs and introduced nothing new into the world. That's Abdallah Abdal Fadi, Is the Quran Infallible, page 127.
Wow.
These are additional pagan practices that are part and parcel of Islam, Quranic Islam today.
Still, exactly. There's actually that entire Quranic verse about not fighting during the sacred months. It's literally verbatim in the Quran.
So there you go. So let's continue. So let's talk now. I'm going to sort of introduce, I will generally introduce something and then I'll move on to something else, introduce that, because I'm putting the pieces on the board, as it were.
Sure.
Right? So I won't necessarily go into depth on anything. This is like an overview session. So let's look at our Makkah. Okay? It's a proper noun. It is Semitic, it is Sabaean, and one of its roots is LMQH, Al-Muk. Right? You will notice that these gods of the different pantheons have multiple names. Sometimes they change gender. On occasion, they even change gender. It's the same god. They just gender swap for some reason.
Right.
And they can have many names. Often it's not a different god under a different name. It's just that, let's say you need water because you live in a dry part of the world. So your god has many qualities. So you revere the quality of rain. So he's your rain god and you call him by his rain name. Someone else might have lots of rain, but they need, I don't know, safety or defense or something. So they revere that aspect of him. That's why there's multiple names, the qualities of Allah, but that's a future story. So you can see here's his name in the Sabaean language, and this is in Ethiopic or Gez, the Ethiopian language. You can see it's very similar because the original Ethiopic, these glyphs from the Sabaean language made their way to Ethiopia. The Ethiopians developed a far more sophisticated language, which then when they conquered Yemen, so Yemen conquered Ethiopia, the language developed, the script improved, and then these guys conquered Yemen, and then they conquered Arabia. And the language, and every sound within Arabic is contained within the Ethiopian language.
Wow. Okay.
All right. And in fact, this Ethiopic, is the closest of all the Semitic languages to Arabic.
Okay. So we can say that that was the precursor to even the Qurayshi dialect of Arabic.
It may well be the case, yes.
Okay.
Actually, now that you bring that up, let me show you this. This is from the book Foreign Words in the Quran by Arthur Jeffrey. I'm just going to bring this up. It's the Foreign Vocabulary of the Quran by Arthur Jeffrey, PhD, Professor of Semitic Languages, School of Oriental Studies, Cairo. Right? So I've just made a table out of what is in the book, and you can see these are words in the Quran from different languages. Because I know the Quran, Allah claims that it's just pure Arabic, but you'll notice we have Syriac, Aramaic, Hebrew, Greek, Ethiopic, Persian, Akkadian, South Arabian, Armenian, Phoenician, Mandaean, Sanskrit, Nabatean, Latin.
Wow.
We can go down this list. There's a number of foreign words in the Quran. Okay, there's a number.
And it's interesting to see how high of a proportion the Syriac words are as well.
Yeah, certainly. And the Ethiopic, now this table is based on what's in the book. In this sense, it's uncritical. I simply took what was in the book, but I can say that Ethiopic and Amharic here can be glommed together as one language. So just for the sake of convenience, make them one language. Then they start to match more or less Greek. And I can tell you there are words now that are known to be Ethiopic, that are in Arabic, that are not in this list, that are not in the book.
Okay.
Right? So the Ethiopic would then count more than the Greek, the Ethiopic influence. And also, if you look at the Coptic influence, for instance, if the northern influences were so strong, then you'd have more Coptic, right?
Very
but Coptic
true.
is only 10 words.
Yeah. Especially if Ethiopic moves up in the way you're saying, then that would make so much sense as well.
Yeah, so there's good reason for that. So there's lots of reasons.
Yeah.
So clearly there was influence from both north and south. So what I'm hoping to do is to provide what happened in the south and then connect it to what's happening in the north, so you can see the bridge between them, how they merged. Right.
Right.
So, by the way, this is available. I will give you the link to this so that everyone can actually have this. It's on my community page. If you scroll down, you'll find it. Otherwise, I'll give you the link. We can drop it in a comment or pin comment in the chat later with all my resources for everyone to have a look for themselves.
Yeah, sure. And I can
Okay.
add them to the description as well, so you guys can also
Sure.
go and verify all of this in your own
Yep.
time.
Yeah, I have my entire archive. I have a number of PhD papers. I have a number of scientific papers and books, references, academic papers. That I've drawn this from. So,
Amazing. Thank you,
Al-Makka,
Lloyd. Mhm.
welcome. Al-Makka is a moon god once worshipped in Yemen, in Saba, or what we know as Sheba, and also in Ethiopia, in Aksum. Okay, the synonyms are Al-Makka, Al-Muk, as well as many, many other names. These are just two of them. Al-Muk is the same as LMQH.
Right.
Okay. Right. So the Sabaean capital was Marib, 120 kilometers east of Sana'a in Yemen, and they were a seafaring people. They built great irrigation works, they built castles, they built temples, and they were a large trading empire. For hundreds of years, they were a very influential, very wealthy trading empire. The British Museum called them the oldest and most important of the South Arabian kingdoms during an exhibition that they once had.
Oh, damn.
And
Okay.
they are known in the Arabic as Saba'iyun. Unfortunately, if you look at some of the translations, they only say the Sabah, so you don't know whether they're talking about the Sabaeans or the Sabaeans. So unfortunately, there's that ambiguity there. There's that. Either way, it's a problem for Islam, but we'll get into that
Yeah.
later.
Okay.
Okay. So now let's continue. So this, of course, is Marib here in Yemen. This is Sana'a. Najran will be up here, and then of course this would be Ethiopia. And so you can see this is the rough geography we're working with right now. You can see the strait is very short, so it's easy to get across here.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at some other Al-Makka
Especially if they're
temples.
great seafaring people as well, you know?
Yes, they were. So they were dedicated, these temples were dedicated to Al-Makka. If you need me to slow down, just let me know. Or you want to go back, just let me know.
Sure.
So
I
there were
feel like you're going
several
at a perfect
Al-Makka
pace.
temples.
Yeah.
Sorry? Good.
I feel like the pace is perfect, but yeah, sorry, do continue.
Okay, thanks. So dedicated to Al-Makka, the moon god of Saba, this temple measured 40 by 60 feet. That's important because we will find something else that links to that again in the near future. So being Sabaean, it is similar to the temples of the Sabaean kingdom, such as the Al-Makka temple of Sirwa and the Al-Makka temple known as the Awan temple in Marib. There's also another temple called the Marib temple close by, just a name. So after Marib, Sirwa was the most important economic and political center of the kingdom of Saba at the start of the 1st century BC. Right? And in front of the building was a platform with 6 pillars called a propylon. These pillars are called propylon in ancient practice, right? Religious practice. And there was Great Bel Gebri, the palace, and which also had 6 pillars once. Think of another building in the center of Mecca, which once also had 6 pillars inside it.
The Kaaba?
Correct. The Kaaba once also had 6 pillars inside it. I'll just
This
show
is
you briefly here.
uncanny. Yeah.
Right? If we go here, let's have a look. Sahih Muslim. Allah's apostle entered the Kaaba, and in it there were 6 pillars, and he stood near a pillar and he made supplication.
Oh my word, literally the exact same setup from
Today,
Sahih Muslim. Guys, this again,
it's inside Bukhari
this
as
is the
well.
Islamic source right there.
It's in Sahih. Well, actually, I call them Da'if Muslim and Da'if Bukhari because whenever you show these to a Muslim, they'll tell you that's Da'if, brother.
I love that. I have heard you use that before, and I was like, spot on. I love that.
So I
Daif
just call
must.
them Da'if Muslim and Da'if Bukhari because, man, it's whatever. So the palace once had 6 pillars. Okay, we'll talk about this now. So Yeha has been identified as a pre-Aksumite occupation based on 19 inscriptions on stone slabs, altars, and seals found at Yeha, all written in South Arabian script. Right now, everything we talk about, I'm going to expand in the future. So I'm introducing them now, and I will touch on these. Be it minutes or hours from now, I will be touching on these. Right?
Okay, cool. So these are all things we need to just bear in mind as you're telling us now, because they will
Yeah, I'll
pop
be
up
coming
later.
back to these, but I'm just laying these down. Yeah.
Okay.
So these are the 8 pillars of the Awam al-Makka temple in Marib. Okay.
Right.
These are the 8 pillars. What's important is not the 8 pillars. What's important are the 7 spaces.
Okay.
Because you have 7 prayers. These are the entrances
Oh, I
to get to God.
see.
You go through
Wow.
that space to get to God, to get to Allah in this case.
Okay.
Understand? So this
Yeah.
is how you enter into the holy place. You go through the space. So there's 7 spaces, 7 prayers. Understand?
Oh, wow.
So
Fascinating.
look at this one, it has 6. This one is broken. You can see this one's broken off here. But
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. As you know, I'm African, so if I want to count more than 10, I have to take off my shoes and socks. So at least now I can one, So moving on. So
So your accent, I
African
love the South
education.
African accent as well. I think, oh, I could listen to it all day.
Thank you. Yeah, well, so yeah, African education is very bad. I attended a school for emotionally disturbed teachers. So forgive me if any of that comes through. That was a joke. So, but notice there are 6 pillars here, and obviously these guys prayed 7 times a day. These guys prayed 5 times a day.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's like just a variation, like denominations within the religion. So, about this location, it was clearly a royal site under the Muqarrabs. This word will come to much later, but this is an important word. The
Okay.
Muqarrabs, probably directly under a king. Okay, they speak of Najran, which is in Arabia. That was where the Christians were concentrated and where heresy was concentrated. The Gnostics were
I
concentrated.
see.
The town of Sirwa seems on language-based evidence to have early contained speakers of Arabic. So obviously Arabs were also in Yemen, and the Yemenis at one point controlled all of Arabia. They conquered
Mhm.
and controlled multiple times all of Arabia. The town played no role in Islamic times, but its site became a great mythic one for Islamic historians. It was very important to them in their
Interesting.
myths, in their stories of the past. And
Very
as an oral
interesting.
culture,
Yeah.
they would obviously tell stories and poems, and they have frequent citations of poetry mentioning it. Okay,
Wow,
so it
because
was
they were
important.
also big on poetry at that time. It was an oral culture, and even the, just the way the Quran is recited comes from their like poetry and the tonality they used to use.
Poetry was
And
like
if
their internet.
yeah, exactly. And if they're alluding to things that have happened here, that's insanely interesting.
Yeah. So, so this again, just to let you know, this is Abyssinia, Ethiopia. This is the locations we just spoke of. This is a couple of the locations we're alluding to, and that's Najran, just so you know. And this area called Hadramaut, here you've got, so Yemen, Arabia, and Mecca is right up there. Okay. So let's
Mhm.
continue. So let's look at our Wam temple. Let's go to the Smithsonian Museum. So
Okay.
they funded this visit. I think his father went, and then his father died, and then they funded him, and he went many decades later. Wendell Phillips and his team excavated the great walled enclosure of Mahram Bilqis, which is the name for the Queen of Sheba, the ancient temple of Awam dedicated to the moon god Al-Makka.
Wow.
So she worshipped the moon god Al-Makka. Tribal unrest in the area halted efforts in 1952. Decades later, they invited Marilyn Phillips and so on to continue. This is dated 2014. Now, the reason I specifically say moon god al-Makka, and I will bring many, many references to that effect, is that Islamic apologists want to claim that he's not a moon god. They want to make other claims, but that's a very specious claim. It's based on faulty information. So, yeah. So now we know al-Makka was a moon god. Now, let's have a quick look at the Raja Jil columns. Now, some places you'll see Raja Lil, other places Raja Jil. So I just,
Right.
you know, so I use them both. These are columns, these are stelae. So archaeologists working in Saudi Arabia continue to puzzle over the meaning of more than 50 groups of oddly arranged standing stones, megaliths. The most famous of which are found at the site of Raja Jil near the ancient oasis town of Al Juf, right? That's up here.
Mhm.
This is in Arabia, so Mecca is here. This is the southern tip of Arabia, and there we go, this up here, top right. They date to the Chalcolithic period, which is 4,500 to 3,500 BC. That's like 7,000 years ago,
Yeah.
depending on some of the dates. So I've used like a conservative date here. Raised more than 5,500 years ago by an unknown people. Many pillars are now fallen. Others are tilting heavily. They were erected in Saudi Arabia's Al Juf province during the 4th millennium before Christ. That's interesting because this location is very close to Petra. And again, all of this will be connected. I'll show you how this is important. These
Okay.
are some of these columns, right?
Right.
These are some of the columns. Now, I know that you're an atheist channel. Many people, obviously, your followers are generally atheists, not religious. But it's not important that they believe. It's important that they need to understand that the people that we are talking to believed this. Talking about rather the people that we're talking about, they believed this, right?
Yeah, most
So
definitely.
Okay, so we need to understand that we need to look at it from their perspective. These people believe this stuff. So you can see an
Exactly.
example of these standing stones. Here's another example of these standing stones, all broken, shattered, leaning, fallen, and so on. Also very weathered, right? Al
Yeah.
Juf was a significant stopover point on several ancient trade highways. Trade highways are very important because that's how information was shared, and in fact, that's how Christianity spread, right? Religions
Hmm.
originally spread through trade routes.
Yeah.
So religious ideas, religious figures, words, language spread through trade routes, right?
Hmm.
And these guys were going to Arabia, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Syria. One trade route, one of the oldest land routes, ran from Yemen to Medina and then to Madi Salih. It then went as far as Damascus and Turkey.
Wow. And
Okay.
that is one of the oldest land routes recorded in history. So, wow. Okay. And look
Yeah.
at look at the area it covers. Yeah. Because
Yeah,
that's
that's
what people
huge.
were
I mean,
saying, right? For a long, long time. Why was Mecca at that point not on any of the like most crucial trade routes? It wasn't even part of the trade route. And giving Muhammad this contextual history as a trader who would come across so many people and stuff, and then Mecca's just missing. This makes sense. The trade point started and ran from Yemen parallel to the Red Sea coast. That makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah, correct. So we'll cover all of this. Everything I'm introducing, we'll go into more depth later. So,
Sure.
okay, they obviously avoided this huge desert. If you look here, there's this massive desert region. They had to avoid most of this, right? Totally uninhabited, uninhabitable.
I
So they
think
had to
even to
avoid all
this
that and
day,
go
right? I
around it.
mean, that might be
Pretty
called
much,
the
I've
empty
been in some of
quarter.
those regions. I've been in man. I've been in the middle of the Rub al Khali with the
Yeah,
military. It's incredible out there. It's empty.
literally.
It's harsh, but it's incredibly beautiful. I can't explain it. It's the most harsh, unforgiving, and most incredibly lonely but beautiful locations. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I've flown over it, and even just seeing like it from like what just the how insanely the expanse of it, but seeing it from the air was daunting enough. I can't imagine being actually in the thick of it. But yeah, again, so
Yeah,
basically the
no,
point was that there's a huge uninhabited space there in Saudi Arabia, which is like harsh desert, proper
yeah,
sand dune desert.
yeah. I can tell stories about that, but so now I want to mention that I'm just quoting what these scholars or what these articles state. Okay, I'm not saying I
Yeah.
necessarily believe what they're saying. I'm just saying this is the sort of the academic thought. Okay, I've got my own ideas based on for reasons. The stones may have indicated the presence of a crossroads and the safer route to take. Okay,
Mhm.
and they are an enigma. Okay, but notice there's a whole bunch of them close to each other. Okay, we're going to get to later on to another religious site with a whole bunch of standing pillars close to each other, little circles of pillars, dozens of circles of pillars close to each other,
Wow.
right?
Okay.
So here you can see more of these little pillars. This is one of the mysteries of Arabia. Now, understand though that there may have been things carved on these pillars that are
Oh,
weathered away, or they may have been destroyed. So just bear that in mind. All right.
yeah. Which is
So
really
what is a
interesting because
propylon?
I was just doing a parallel. Sorry, I was just thinking of a
Sure.
parallel to like the Stonehenge and some of the earliest stone sites in Britain, but again,
Hmm.
not with carvings of any kind. You know, it was more like the stone that they revered. But in this situation, if you're saying there could have potentially even been inscriptions on there that have been weathered away, that's mind-boggling.
Yeah, no, there's reasons why I'm saying that. So we'll come to all of that. So now let's talk about pillars in architecture in religious history, right? Ancient religious history. So they're called propylae. They're monumental gates or entranceways to a temple or a religious complex. They're a symbolic, secular slash religious partition. You have to pass through and this was part then, at least in that context, okay? In that context, they were part of pagan ritual worship, right?
Right.
So in the Century Dictionary and Encyclopedia, it says in ancient Egyptian architecture, there were a monumental gateway, usually between two towers, like truncated pyramids. Okay, fine and well. The Egyptians did that. In Chambers' 20th century dictionary, it's monumental gateway before the entrance of an ancient Egyptian temple. Okay, so it's an Egyptian idea that someone liked and it became popular.
Hmm.
Fantastic. Okay, let's have a look at this Egyptian temple, which has a gate, which has these pillars, this false gateway into the entrance of the Egyptian temple. Sorry, no, that's not an Egyptian temple. That is in Jerusalem, I believe. And that is the mosque on the Dome of the Rock.
That's Alexa, yeah. And that
So,
has This okay, so when it was first, was that pre-pillar to the entrance of the mosque as you're discussing, the propylon type copy paste, was that there from the outset of the building of this mosque?
I don't know. I haven't looked that deeply into it, but it
Okay.
certainly has one.
Oh my
Right.
days. Masjid al-Aqsa itself testifies to
And
that.
then notice we also have the same at this other entrance. You have another one right in front of the door. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pillars
Yep. With
just before
okay.
you go. So you'll start to see these little parallels are running constantly. All right. So let's look at Aksum now. Aksum was one of four great powers alongside Rome, Persia, and China. So these guys rivaled Rome. They rivaled
All
Persia
the
and
world's
China.
great powers that, yeah, at that
Yeah.
time.
And then they disappeared. No one heard of them anymore. So
Just gone.
according to
Yeah.
Mani, of the Manichaeans, right? He was the founder of Manichaeanism, and he was a prolific writer. It had influence over Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia, Arabia, Egypt, and extensive trade contacts with Asia and the Mediterranean. And the Aksamites developed Africa's only indigenous written script, Ge'ez. Now, I can show a paper, which I might show later, is that the language of Ge'ez, the Ethiopian language, the original Ethiopian language, is on the basis, as far as preserved languages go, it is the world's oldest language. It is the
Wow.
oldest unchanged language in the world. So, in other words, even ancient Hebrew has changed. Like modern Hebrew and ancient Hebrew have changed significantly. So, some of the word forms can no longer be determined because the language has changed in the last 5 or 6,000 years. Whereas
Yeah.
Ge'ez, many of the original words are still there today. So, in fact, you can trace the development of the language and other languages based off of Ge'ez. And
Wow.
they also
Okay.
had these
So it's
words.
it's more of a living language in that sense, even more so than Hebrew is in terms of how we can still translate those exact words back.
Yes, you can find those words. Yeah. So they mentioned that the Sabaeans were in Africa around the millennium of the middle of the first millennium before Christ, right? That's 500 BC, 700 BC. There were Sabaeans in the Horn of Africa, okay, in the realm of Axum, Eritrea, Ethiopia. And there are inscriptions, and they mention the national cult of Al-Makka, which we see in the Sabaean
Right.
moon god. But they were
Yeah.
mixed up with various non-Sabaean communities. Okay, although scholars aren't sure exactly how these groups all interconnected, different religions, different languages, but clearly this was a group that was very much mixed in with other cultures.
Hmm.
So this was a very what would you say, ecumenical society. They had lots of different people living within that same demographic.
Yeah. So
Okay,
pretty
so
pluralistic with the late crossover.
thank you. That's
Mhm.
that's the word I was probably looking for. Right. And notice also this Aksumite stele, right? There's just this mention. This paper is to investigate the origins of the Aksumite stele in the light of Near Eastern and African megalithism, standing stones like Stonehenge,
Yeah.
because you will find as we get to the end of this presentation that the Kaaba has things that are in common with megaliths like Stonehenge.
Hmm.
We will get to that, but that comes much later.
Is that
So, for
besides the
instance,
fact that it even has the rock in it as well, the black stone? Because that's also
yes,
part of an extension of the stone veneration, I reckon. Yeah.
correct. So even in the Negev, right, third millennium BC, there are cairns of flat stones, and also in Jordan. And Jordan is very important. We'll see later why. And there was a sanctuary devoted to the ancestor cult, okay, discovered at southern Jordan. So we'll talk about that, but it consists of a circle about 20 meters in diameter of stone slabs carved with male and female portraits. Okay, so
Okay.
this
Wow.
concept, this idea goes around a lot.
Hmm.
So the Aksumite Empire. So according to National Geographic, the Aksumite Empire was a wealthy trading nation in northeastern Africa, right? Achieving prominence by the first century, unifying and controlling a large state and trade routes that were linked to the Roman Empire. In fact, they became the largest traders with the Romans,
Wow.
right? And they were linked to the Middle East and India, and they are the ones who introduced Christianity to the rest of sub-Saharan Africa.
Oh, wow. So you can imagine how much power they yielded at that time.
Yeah, very much influential. Archaeologists have found evidence of a complex society called Diamat or Dimit that preceded the rise of Aksum by several centuries, based in Yeha in the Tigray Highlands. Okay, so just more
Wow.
confirmatory evidence. Now,
Yeah.
this Dimit, this means to mimic, to copy. At least it seems to. At least it would seem that this word means this, and there's a reason for that. Again, everything. So it was positioned at the crossroads of trade routes from East African coast to the African interior. And trading partners included most of the major states in the known world: Egypt, South Arabia, the Middle East, India, and China.
Wow, wow,
Right?
wow.
The most important commercial partner was the Byzantine Romans.
Okay.
Right? And this was Axum. They controlled at least this area, if not much more to the east and more to the north.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So they controlled this entire area here at
And
one
as you
time.
can see, Mecca falls within that, the current Mecca, anyway.
Yeah. They were influential. They did not directly control Mecca, I believe, but they certainly influenced it from a political and from an economic standpoint. Heavy trade links. The guards would accompany the caravans. They would sell things, buy things. So certainly they had strong influence there. Right, let's look at some coins. So Axum was the first African country to mint its own coins in gold, silver, and bronze, and also in the standard weight categories issued by the Roman Empire. So they wanted to play nice with Rome.
Mm-hmm.
So these coins have been recovered as far away as India, and they were the first Christian kingdom to put crosses on coins.
Oh, right. Okay.
So the reason I say this is, again, alluding to the future, is that Christianity came to Ethiopia about 200 or 300 years earlier than scholars had previously suspected.
Wow.
And these Ethiopians were in Mecca, at least according to the standard narrative. They were in Mecca. Muhammad learned from them. He heard them recite the Bible. They had a Bible that was written in Ge'ez long before there was an Arabic Bible, and it was paraphrased into the Arabic.
Well, even
So
like Warwick bin Nawfal was known to be a Gnostic or a Christian heretic of some sort, right? And
historian or something of the nature, yeah.
which just
Yeah,
shows
we
you,
will.
obviously, he was surrounded by various different types of Christians and Jews at that time.
And early on, now look, again, this is we're looking back in history, but early in the day, these guys were effectively, they weren't, I wouldn't say they were Unitarians, but the way that they defined their belief in the Godhead, God the Father, God the Son, and so on, God the Holy Spirit, but also the divine and the human nature of Jesus, the way they defined it, effectively, they were considered back then heretics. Right? There was a
Right.
time when they were considered heretics for the way that they viewed this. And the way that they viewed Jesus, the way that they viewed the Godhead, is very, very similar, if not identical, to the way it is in Islam.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And if you consider some of the connections to, just to veer off a little bit, the first person who called the adhan, right, the call to prayer with Muhammad, was Ethiopian.
Yeah.
The guy who repaired the Kaaba was Ethiopian. In fact, the woman who was with him from birth until death, who was his wet nurse, and she was with him all his life, Ayman, was Ethiopian. The only
Wow.
two languages Muhammad is said to have spoken is Arabic and Ethiopian.
Okay.
The first two
Wow.
hijras didn't go to Medina. The first hijrah in Islam and the second hijrah in Islam went to Ethiopia.
Yeah, the Abyssinian king. Is that when you're talking about the? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my days. Okay.
Right? Muhammad used to listen to brothers recite the Quran in Ethiopian. Right? The word, the Tawhid, right, which is the central concept of Islam, that's an Ethiopian word. It comes from the Ethiopian Tawahedo, Ethiopian Orthodox Tawhedo Church. The term Tawhid means unification.
So is
Obviously, the
that from
Godhead.
almost like the Unitarian perspective, that, and then it's because that, as you said, that's the central concept of oneness in Islam, and if they've
Yeah,
picked
but
up
it
that
means
concept of,
unification.
yeah, so the amalgamation of all of those things, which I think Islam does very well, right? We'll see as this presentation goes on, all the different gods and attributes that eventually get amalgamated into Allah. But even
Correct.
Tawheed, you're saying, goes back to the Ethiopian.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
you
And
just
in fact,
yeah, go ahead.
go on, please.
I was just going to say, from each angle that you're talking about it, whether it's like the closest people to Muhammad or the languages that he spoke or whatever's happening around him, there is such a heavy influence of Ethiopia. And even according to Islamic, historians themselves, as you said, that hijrah of his companions to the king of Abyssinia and saying that that was a safe space for us, and it makes sense, alluding to like the pluralistic society we mentioned earlier. But it's already kind of all coming together. Like there's definitely some causation here between what's happening in Ethiopia.
And they were there for 15 years in Ethiopia. So they had time to gather a lot of this. So if you look at the Ethiopian Orthodox Tawhido Church, right, the Church of the Tawhid,
Mm.
so the women and men are segregated.
Right.
Just like in the mosque, right? If
Yeah.
you have, I mean, you have the women cover their hair, you take off your shoes before you go in, they don't do pork, they circumcise, they have lots of long fasts. Understand? These
Yeah.
are practices that, but that's a story for another day. So let's
Starting to ring a
continue.
bell. Yeah.
Yep. So let's have a look. These are all Ethiopian coins. Okay. You can see these are Ethiopian coins with crosses on them. Right. These
Yeah.
are all Ethiopian coins with crosses on them. Right. So they adopted Christianity very, very early. Now, the Aksumite ruler was called the Negusa-Nagas, the King of Kings. Right. And King Azana ruled from about 320 to 360 AD. He converted to Christianity, as was verified by Aksumite coins. Now you can
Okay.
see the original Aksumite coins had a thing called a star and a crescent. I've
Oh,
never seen that symbol before.
yes.
Not sure where hold on. Look, have you seen a symbol like that?
Oh,
I'm not sure.
I don't know, Lloyd, off the top of my head. Where on flags, on mosques, is the
Maybe someone
Islamic
in the
crescent
chat can help
involved?
us. Where have we seen the
Thanks.
star? Because this is not the sun. In this case, in this example, this is not the sun. This is actually a star circle, like Venus.
Yeah, exactly, precisely. Guys, is the penny dropping literally for anyone? Where have we
Literally, yeah.
seen?
So they were pagans before they were Christians. He was a pagan who converted, right? And don't forget, they used to worship the moon god Al-Makka. This is the symbol of the moon god Al-Makka. It's one of his symbols, right? So you
Yeah.
can see there are multiple coins here with the king, with his symbol, okay? And here you can see again another one. So there's multiple of these coins with this symbol. And then, of course, he started to put crosses on the currency. He changed. He became a Christian.
Wow.
All
So the
right.
coins completely, yeah, testify
Yep.
to that and the change and
So
the Venus star. Yeah.
So the crescent and the star, the crescent and the star is a very old symbol that goes back BC. That's a pagan symbol to the moon god Almaka, and also who's the same as the Babylonian moon god of Sin, or the moon god called Shin or Sin. So Ethiopia, the first Christian state, so they became the first sub-Saharan state to embrace Christianity. It was proclaimed the state religion in the early 4th century. However, they were Christian from the 2nd century onwards. Okay.
Right.
Um, For a century prior, Roman traders had brought knowledge of the Christian religion to the Aksumite mercantile network. These
Okay.
mercantile networks spread words, coinage, ideas, inventions,
Stories,
symbols.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the 6th century, Aksumite king Caleb sent a force across the Red Sea to subdue the Yemenis. Dominating South Arabia for 70 years, the Byzantine emperor supported Aksum largely due to Yemen's persecution of Christians. We'll get more into that story. So, right. So let's look at the first church in sub-Saharan Africa. So this is from the Smithsonian. A church unearthed in Ethiopia rewrites the history of Christianity in Africa. So let's have a quick look at this. So archaeologists can now more closely date when Christianity spread to the Aksumite Empire, right? So this is them digging in Ethiopia in Aksum. We've just seen Aksum, right? This is where we discovered Yeha, right? This dig site is not very far from Yeha. So the oldest known Christian church in sub-Saharan Africa has been found, okay, and shows its surprisingly early conversion to Christianity. This group would go on to dominate much of Eastern Africa and Western Arabia. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more, as much as I can for your audience. Okay, so they dominated Eastern Africa and Western Arabia. And of course, this structure was built around the 4th century, about the time when Roman Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity in 313 CE. He did not make Christianity state religion, he just legalized it. He legalized its practice, right? So Christianity arrived at an early date in the area, nearly 3,000 miles from Rome. And this find suggests that the new religion spread through long-distance trading networks. So these religious ideas spread through trading networks. The Arabs had trading networks all the way into Turkey, and they brought back the Turkish gods. And we'll see evidence of that later, that linked the Mediterranean via the Red Sea with Africa and South Asia. Aksum was one of the world's most influential ancient civilizations and remains one of the least widely known. They trade by camel. Sorry,
yeah. No, I mean, it's just mind-blowing to me as well, because again, with the direct, like, Quranic reference, I had always been kind of, as a Muslim, on a wild goose chase about like the kingdom of Sheba and the Queen of Sheba and this huge empire that she was kind of in charge of, and then her almost having an empire to rival Solomon's. And I was just like, even within Western history, even at school, we're not barely taught about African empires, and I mean, let alone, you know, almost prehistoric ones that predate like Muhammad, Christ, all of that. We just never go into it. So now you're actually reading out that Axum it had such a stronghold, and the trade network there was so influential around the world, yet we've known nothing
Yeah.
hardly about this. And even the one before that, the civilization that
The
was,
Yemenis, Yeha.
yeah, or was it the one that began with D? There
Dimit,
was, yeah,
the,
maybe was
the
it them? The one that even
the
preceded
Yemenis.
this that was found in the mountain
Oh,
hilltops.
Yeha, the Sabaean Empire.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. So there's a wealth of things happening here that we're just unprivy to.
Yeah. So because Islam likes to pretend that Islam sort of, well, generally Islamic scholars, the narrative is that Islam sort of developed in this vacuum. But when you look at the history, this was like this place was buzzing with multiple languages and groups. We'll cover more and more of this as we go. I'll start adding more depth and going
Sure.
faster and adding, but understand this was not an isolated place. Now, certainly Arabia wasn't exactly a metropolis like Athens, but there was activity and influence from multiple different sources. Language was common. Okay, the fact that during the Islamic period there was no written language, that's an anomaly, because
Hmm.
before and after, well prior to Islam, there were several languages being used, and the Yemenis were all literate. They wrote, they had script, they wrote,
Yeah.
and then suddenly Islam comes along and no, nothing, nothing. Somehow, where's the records? I don't know. We don't have any. We don't have any historical records. Isn't that just convenient? And
Very shady.
we'll cover all of that. So you can see there where you got the cross here again, a
Yeah.
couple of crosses on that thing, and so Christianity had reached Egypt by the 3rd century AD, so that's in the 200s. But it was not until Constantine's legalization of Christian observance that the church expanded across Europe and the Near East. And now they say that Christianity arrived in Ethiopia at the same time. There was no delay. It arrived in Ethiopia at the same time as it went everywhere else. So it's on the same time scale. In fact, possibly before Armenia, right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
So you have the earliest physical evidence for a church in Ethiopia, and there were churches being built. This is like a large church, but home to temples built. Now, the temple was built in a Southern Arabian style, dating to centuries before the rise of Axum. It's built in the style of the people of Yeha. The temples reflect the influence of the Sabaeans, who dominated the lucrative incense trade, and whose power reached across the Red Sea. The building was 60 feet long and 40 feet wide, resembling the ancient Roman style of a basilica.
Oh,
Remember the
wow.
Yeha temple, 60 feet long, 40 feet wide, same dimensions, same style.
Uh-huh.
They just took it over and converted it into a church. This was
Right.
a common practice, right? So this unusual collection of artifacts suggests a mixing of pagan and early Christian traditions, and we'll find lots of that. So, in other words, Christianity arrives, and then the pagans arrive, the heretics arrive, the Gnostics arrive, and now they're all trying to push a message, because the Christian missionaries were being very successful in converting people away from paganism,
Hmm.
getting them away from heresy and so on, right? And of course, now the pagans had to adapt their message. They had to obviously started to plagiarize these ideas, push the ideas to compete, and the
Yeah.
heretics obviously were also competing. So now you had this complete mess going on, a total mess. So there was a huge fight for what was orthodoxy back then. So now we know
Mhm.
there's evidence of the mixing. And here you see the moon god with the 2 horns, right? So now you
Yes.
see the moon god and the 2 horns, right, on that ring. So there was a Christian presence northeast of Axum at a very early date. And the spread of Christianity was intertwined with commerce, as it was with other religions, even the pagan religions. And long distance trade routes played a significant role in the introduction of Christianity in Ethiopia. And they were a very important center of the trading network in the ancient world. I'll leave that there. Does that help to clarify a few things?
Yes, most definitely. And I think, I mean, just up to where you are now, like the picture you've painted in terms of what's happening, how many languages are being spoken, the trade routes, the influence, and now just like even adapting a building kind of structure and just this marketplace of ideas is happening, and they're kind of like
Yeah.
building on what was there before. Yeah, this is already really starting to kind of like take shape. Just stop you for 1 second. Ultra, thank you so much for your super chat. G Block, as always, my friend. And Secular Sekai as well. Thank you so much for your super chat. Guys, if you did want to ask a question instead of just sending a super sticker, by all means, go ahead and ask questions. Lloyd also really encourages like audience participation and kind of engaging you guys. So feel free to kind of, get as involved as you want to in this presentation. But yeah, thank you guys for your support so far. And yeah, we'll continue.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, guys. So hopefully I'm painted a different, at least a lovely historical picture here to give you some background. I've started to give some background. So now the first hijrah is the migration to Abyssinia. So Muslims found refuge in Christian Axum, right, in 614 AD, roundabout. I mean, the date varies slightly, but roughly. When the apostle saw the affliction of his companions and he escaped it because of his standing with Allah and his uncle, he could not protect them. And he said, "Go to Abyssinia, for the king will not tolerate injustice, and it is a friendly country." Thereupon his companions went to Abyssinia, and this was the first hijrah. So how did you know it was a friendly country?
Yeah, good question.
Right?
How did you know it was a friendly country and the king would be so accommodating?
Correct. So that's in Ibn Ishaq, page 146. That's Guillaume's Sirat Rasulullah, the life of Muhammad, right? And in Arabic, hijrah, al-Habasa, is where Muhammad's followers, the Sahaba, fled the persecution of the Quraysh tribe. And the Aksumite king who received them is known as the Negus, in Arabic, the Najasi, right? Some of the exiles returned to Mecca and made the 622 Hijrah to Medina with Muhammad. Others remained until they came to Medina in 628. So they were there for about 15 years.
Right.
So a lot of time to absorb all of these ideas, right?
True. Very true.
I'm going to skip over this. I'm just going to mention one small thing here, but of course, the Muslims do within the Sirah, within the biographies of Muhammad, basically the Gospels of Muhammad, they do want to claim that they presented their beliefs about Jesus and about God and so on to the Negus, the king, the Christian king, and he believed them, and he said, "Yes, we have the same beliefs." But apparently, according to these sources, they gave a, shall we say, an edited version of their beliefs, one that was more suited to his ideas.
Right.
And he said, "Yes, I am one of you. You are one of us." But apparently, they didn't give him the full picture. In which case, we'd know, for instance, that they did not share this idea, the same idea of the same God.
Yeah, because
Okay.
sorry, just to cut you off real quick, in the Islamic propaganda film that is The Message, which I grew up on, it's actually like one of the most, important lines where the king says, "We are like two rays of sunshine and like, towards the same God, but we are just the thing that separates us is like you're one ray of sunshine and I'm the other, but the source is the same." But yeah, as you said, they obviously hid a lot.
Yeah. So Muslim accounts state that upon hearing these words, the Negus declared that Jesus was indeed no more than what he had said, because they said Jesus is God's servant, his prophet, his spirit, and his word. They mean something completely different when they say his word, his spirit. That's a completely different idea than what is meant by the Christian vocabulary. So yeah. Okay, let's have a look at a few Islamic links to Ethiopia. So the Christian community in South Arabia at Najran was the oldest Christian community in Arabia. Right? They were persecuted by the Jewish king. Now, I know they say Jewish, but this would not be Orthodox Jewish in any way. And when I say Orthodox, I don't mean Hasidic Jews. I just mean this guy would have been a little bit of a heretic, according to what I can see. He's Jew-ish, more
Okay.
ish than Jew, right?
Okay.
So
So
definitely,
yeah, is this is it when you say like Jewish, how in terms of like the like heresy or whatever, how much are we seeing within the Jewish religion vis-a-vis the Christian religions? Like is like some of them follow the Book of Enoch, and then would they be considered outright heretics? Do you know what I mean? Just is
so
there
there was a huge fight from the first century, because remember, all the Christians were originally Jews. The
yeah.
message was originally directed to Jews. So they came out of a Jewish culture, but there was St. Paul is attacked heavily within Islamic polemics, right?
Mm,
Because St. Paul eventually had to make a decision, and he convinced the rest of the church fathers, the early church fathers, including James, the brother of Jesus, and others who were the heads of the church in Jerusalem at the time. They said, "Look, we have Jews, right? who come from a Jewish culture and a Jewish milieu, a Jewish background, Jewish knowledge, and so on. And then we've got these pagans. And we now want to give the same message to these pagans. And you guys are saying that these pagans must become Jewish, in other words, circumcise themselves, follow all the Jewish customs, follow the Jewish laws, plus believe in Jesus. And he said, hold on, that's 2 steps. That's too many steps. What's important is that we believe in Jesus, not that they become Jews first, right? So he changed that requirement and said, look, and then they agreed that, yes, baptism, no need for circumcision, and so on, and let's believe in Jesus. So that he changed a lot of that. That's also, it was not legal for a pagan to become a Jew, because it was a legal status. Just like in Islam, it's a legal status, right? So if you, as a pagan, adopted Judaism, the Romans could throw you in jail. You could be fined. You could be hurt because of it.
Yeah.
It wasn't something you could just casually do. Understand? There were huge fights about it, and eventually they decided, look, we all need to be one body. We can't be the Jewish Christians and then the other guys who are, we all have to follow one set of rules, and they changed that. And so anyway, so these Jews are slightly, I would say, from what I can gather, slightly heretical. They are,
Right.
they've deviated slightly from the way. So he's generally Jewish, but there was a lot of heretical Judaism in the area at the time as well, just as heretical Christianity. And there was still a strong Jewish influence behind Christianity of the day.
I see.
So,
okay, thanks.
So many of them were Nestorians. Others were Monophysites, more or less related to the Monophysite Church of Abyssinia. Monophysite, which we will know as the Ethiopian Orthodox Tawhid Church, or Tawahedo Church, right? So in international trade, Abyssinia was the destination of Qusay's 4 sons, one of his 4 sons, and also trade relations between Mecca and Ethiopia went back to the late 5th or early 6th century. And in fact, we know it went back to about 800 BC, right?
Yeah.
And the Arabic word Injil also resembles the, I'm going to fix that word now.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
I'm going to change this because Wanjil. In fact, okay, so now let's just put all this back.
Sure. While you're doing that, I just want to say, Jojo Freelancer, I actually haven't got your question, but feel free to type it in the chat here and we'll pull it up.
All right. So, thanks. So now the Arabic word, the Injil, because remember the Injil is what they claim is the name of the New Testament in the Quran, right? So that's the Arabic name for the New Testament, the Islamic name for the New Testament. Now, of course, the Injil does not resemble the current New Testament as we know it, or doesn't resemble the New Testament. It resembles the Gnostic Gospels. So the Injil seems to be the Gnostic Gospels, right, which were rife at the time. And of course, the word Injil is very similar to the Ethiopic word, which is for the New Testament, which is Wanjil.
Okay. Wow.
See, Injil, Wanjil, Injil,
Yeah.
Wanjil. I'd say they're fairly similar. They sound so. The word had been introduced
Very
into
much
Arabia by Abyssinian Christians at the beginning of the 6th century. So the generally accepted origin is Greek, Evangelion, good news, entering the Arabic via Ethiopic Wanjil. You see?
Wow.
So you've got Evangelion, Euangelion, right? Injil. But Evangelion doesn't exactly roll off the tongue and become Injil.
True.
Wanjil certainly becomes Injil very simply.
Yep.
Right? So now Abyssinian, okay, Ethiopic, philologically, according to the language, the history of language and the structure of language, Ethiopic is the ancient language of Abyssinia. It is the most closely related to Arabic of all the Semitic languages.
Oh, wow. Wow, wow,
Right?
wow. And that would most definitely testify to what you're showing us with the proportion of the Quranic language earlier as well.
Yeah, the Ethiopian origin. So the Christology of the Quran seems to come from Ethiopia.
Yeah.
At the very least. Right. So once we finish all this with Ethiopia, we'll pretty much focus just heavily on Yemen after this. So these contacts, as a matter of fact, with the ancient Ge'ez, okay? So this ancient language with which the Arabs were in contact in pre-Islamic days and during Muhammad's life, these contacts were fairly close. Previous to the birth of Muhammad, the southern portion of Arabia had been under Abyssinian rule. And of course, the story of the Year of the Elephant, where these, Abraha with these elephants invaded Mecca. Mecca was saved from the Abyssinian army, which marched up to destroy the city, and there were trade relations between Abyssinia and Arabia at a much earlier period than the Aksumite occupation. Friendly relations continued, and also Muhammad sent his followers to seek refuge in Abyssinia, and Meccan merchants employed Abyssinian troops as escorts.
Wow. Okay.
Right? His first nurse was an Abyssinian woman, and she was with him until his death, according to the Islamic narrative. So an Abyssinian woman was with him from birth to death. She was his wet nurse. She suckled him.
According to the Islamic narrative as well. So we're not even deviating from that. Yeah.
So that's apparently why he speaks Ethiopian. That's the only other language he spoke. The man he first chose as Muad'Din was Bilal al-Habashi, right? Habashi. So he was an Ethiopian. And the tradition noted he was particularly skilled in the Ethiopic language.
Wow. Okay.
And they had a Bible when he was alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
They had a Ge'ez Bible.
Yeah. And when it says skilled in Ethiopic language, sorry, so when we talk about the writing, that almost, again, when Islam comes around, they just say, these people aren't literate in that sense. So how far do we let that claim take hold when we see, like, when it says that Bilal was well-versed in Ethiopic, would you assume that he could maybe write or not at all?
So I will come. So we'll circle back. Just like Jen Psaki loves to say, we'll circle back to that in the future.
Okay,
Except
cool.
I'm not trying to dodge political questions, but
no, that's fine. You can take that one, and as it unfolds,
so
that's fine.
That region was filled with people that were literate, that had script, that wrote.
Yeah.
Writing, inscriptions, even graffiti was very common in at least 7 languages.
Wow.
Right? Then Muhammad comes along and suddenly all of this archaeology disappears, destroyed, missing. All the paper records gone. No writings, nothing for 200 years. And then suddenly, when they start producing these hadith, then suddenly Arabic language writing resumes again. But for that period, just before Muhammad and just until the hadith came, somehow all the records are missing, or a large number of them, a significant portion. But prior to that, the Yemenis had writing. The Ethiopians had writing. They wrote. But the Arabs somehow, who were mixed up in this like this, inseparable, they didn't have writing. Just sheer coincidence, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So that no historical records survived. Just really, really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, this is why your knowledge and research here is knocking down walls. But yeah, sorry. Feel free to continue.
So we'll talk more about. Okay. Now guys. So that finishes that introduction. So I'll go on to the next section, which is now to focus more on Islam and Yemen. Right. So I just wanted to lay some of these things down. So, any comments or questions in the chat that I need to attend to?
I've got some coming through now, but I'm just trying to see if how much the question is relevant to the topic, because I don't want us to be thrown off entirely. So yeah, you can carry on for now, and then I'll just bring this up as soon as I've read it in full.
All right. So now I want to talk about Islamic symbolism, right? And of course, this is a mosque. This is the crescent moon, which, as we've seen, is a pagan crescent symbol. And this pagan symbol, this Babylonian symbol, goes back thousands of years, including the crescent and star. Right. Thank you, Jib. Now, so let's have a look at the pagan crescent moon. So the hilal is the crescent. This is Islam's symbol. This crescent moon is the hilal, right? You'll see sometimes it's this way, sometimes it's this way, and sometimes it's vertical, right?
Yeah.
The shape of it just depends how far north you are. The further north you go, the more that the moon turns down, and the more you see this kind of axis. So as you go south, it gets like this, and as you go north, it turns like that. So that's the only reason. Hilal, right, is the crescent. So the moon has 12 phases, and several of those phases were named. And the moon was seen as a deity, and Hilal is the name of the pagan god of the crescent moon. Hilal is the name of a pagan moon god.
Wow.
In fact,
Okay.
the Arab pagan moon god.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you say Hilal, it's not just a word meaning crescent, it's the name of a pagan moon god of the crescent moon. So let's have a look at the Arab League. Okay, let's see. Crescent and star. Let's see. Star, crescent, and stars. Okay, crescent, and then some Arabic writing in the middle. Star. Right, crescent and star, crescent and star, star, crescent and star, crescent and star, star, star. Excellent. Lots of crescents and stars. Okay, just sheer coincidence. And of course, let's have a look at, just out of curiosity, this pentagram on the flag of Morocco. right? If you've ever seen movies that involve witchcraft or Satanism, you'll see that there's the pentagram in those movies. It features
Sure,
heavily as
correct.
the symbol of Satanism and witchcraft. So the pentagram is the Babylonian pagan symbol of the gods Ishtar and Marduk. Okay, the
Wow.
red is from
Okay.
the Imams of Yemen, and the pentagram is the seal of Solomon as well. And Solomon features in Islamic history and myth, right? So, but now you've got the pentagram. Of course, if you look, I went in online, I went and found a proper satanic pentagram, and there we go. And I'd say they look fairly similar. I'd say there's a reasonable similarity between the two.
Yeah,
That would tell
most
us.
definitely, I'd agree.
And all of these pentagrams can be traced to the Babylonian symbol, right?
Okay.
Historically, all of them are traced to the Babylonian pagan symbol, right? So the hilal is the crescent. This is Islam's symbol. The earliest version is the Egyptian hieroglyph for month that features a crescent above a star, and it's the remnant of a lunar calendar. I know
Hmm.
there's a religion, I can't think of its name right now, that uses a lunar calendar. If I know it.
Can anyone in the chat help us out? What
Yeah,
religion is it that follows the lunar calendar and has a
just
massive month coming up, which is also from before its
yeah, yeah.
time?
Now, this symbol has spiritual significance in ancient Mesopotamia. The Babylonian cuneiform verb shiptu, here we go, means incantation. It originally took a form very similar to the modern star and crescent. You can see here different forms of it through history and different geographies, and it was used to ward off evil. It was incantations designed to ward off evil. So you used to recite, incantations are recited,
Hmm.
just like a certain book that I've heard of that you're apparently called the recitation. But I, I,
Very
um,
interesting.
so this boundary. Now let's look at the boundary stone of King Nebuchadnezzar. He's mentioned in the Bible. He's a genuine historical figure. Nebuchadnezzar I from Babylon. This is 1200 BC, roughly. Contains a star within a crescent right there. As you know, he was a good Muslim according to this symbol, at least. And the symbols were associated with the deities Shin, the moon, and Ishtar, Venus.
Wow.
Okay,
I mean,
so
yeah, and I'm just things from the Quran are coming into my head based on this, but we'll delve into that in a second. But Lloyd, I do have a question for you. Let me know if this rings any bells to you. Um, One of my regular viewers is asking, so this is Abbasid Islam, right? Sir De Young, you saw Mel's show on Speaker's Corner, right? Because there is a distinction between Umayyad Islam and Abbasid Islam, correct?
they just, those are different. The Umayyads was, I believe, the first major Islamic empire, a military empire, right, political empire that pushed Islam, and then they were conquered around 750 by the Abbasids. Right now, that's Mal's specialty. However, during that time, the terms Islam and Muslim were not common terms. Right, they called themselves Muhajirun, but more commonly, so only around the 900s, about a couple of hundred years after Muhammad died, did they start using the terms Islam and Muslims. Prior to that, they were called the believers, the Mu'mineen, right? And in fact, prior to that, they were called the Hanifs.
Hmm.
Okay, and we're going to get into the Hanif and the Hanifan. We will get into that. So they were called the believers, and they were called, and Hanifa comes from a Syriac word meaning from Hanpe, which means pagans and heretics. In other words, they were viewed as Christian heretics. And the Jews viewed them as heretics as well. So the Jews and Christians both called them heretics because they were said to be heretics of the Christian and Jewish religion. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
And the Mu'mineen was an ecumenical movement, which was a monotheistic religion, which basically worshipped the Christian God. And then at some point they split off and they called themselves Muslims to separate themselves. And the term Muslim really comes from the Almoravids, who were a subculture within the Abbasids. And what happens is the Abbasids were the Mu'mineen, and then the Muravids were the Muslims. And then they eventually that flipped around, and they generally all became Muslims to separate themselves from the Christians and the Jews to create a
Wow.
new identity.
Well, thank you, Lloyd. I think that answered the question. I hope it answered the question for you as well. And feel free to ask again if you have anything else you need clarification. But thank you, Lloyd, for that. We've got another question here for you. One of my other regular viewers, Stop Scamming Man, thank you so much for your support. Stop Scamming Man is saying, been reading Ibn Ishaq's book. He largely doesn't demonize pre-Islamic Arabians or portray them as super isolated or ignorant. Salman even said to have worked and studied under 3 Syrian bishops. So I don't know if you want to comment on that, Lloyd, or...
I think that confirms that they were very comfortable with the fact that paganism was common in that era, that
Right.
Muhammad was born into a pagan family. He even in the Islamic records, he worshipped the pagan gods Al-Uzza, right? He worshipped the pagan god Al-Uzza. He was consecrated to Hubal, right? Hubal is simply who is just a prefix meaning he who is Baal. So he was
Yeah.
consecrated. We'll get into all of that. He was consecrated to Hubal by his grandfather, right? And he had 2 sons with Khadija who were called Abd Manaf and Abd al-Uzza, the slave of Manaf and the slave of al-Uzza. Remember, there's the 3 female gods, Alat, Manat, al-Uzza. Manat and Manaf are just male and female versions of the same god. So you had
Oh, right.
Abd
Yeah.
Manaf,
Manaf is the
right?
male.
You had Manaf was a pagan god, god of the star. And then you had Al-Uzza. So he had a son called Abd al-Uzza, slave of Al-Uzza. And according to Islamic scriptures, he and his wife prayed to Al-Uzza every night before bed. And he even sacrificed, according to his own scriptures, he sacrificed a ram to Al-Uzza.
Yeah.
So, and of
So,
course, the modern narrative
yeah.
tries to paint him as a Muslim from birth, literally from before birth.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, again, the problem with the satanic verses and all of that comes to light. But also, it's really interesting because it is only once you look into like Ibn Ishaq and things like this where they do openly talk about the pilgrimage that's done, you know, that was done way before Islam as we know it today. Yet the exact same thing is happening. And they do form those links because I think at some level they are completely undeniable. But it's interesting that most lay Muslims, like even myself included when I was one, we try so hard to run away from that because for us that like goes against the very foundations of Islam. So we just go with everybody's inherent faculty is to be a Muslim, you know, as like that's the inherent natural state of being almost. And this is just kind of like breaking all of that down. So it is very interesting that even Islamic early scholarship has to state certain things how they are, and their own sources testify to a lot that's being said here. It's just that Lloyd has been kind enough to deep dive and show us the exact roots of it. So yeah, thank you so much again, Stop Scamming Man. And
You're welcome. Yeah.
Umesh, thank you so much for your super sticker as well and your support. Thank you for being here. Sorry, Lloyd, the floor is
Just to
yours.
answer John Stopman. Ek is Suid-Afrikaner, ek is van Kaapstad, ek woon in Pole. En nee, so ek is nie Nederlander nie. Ja, né? Ek is Suid-Afrikaner. Maar ek kan nie verstaan as so stadig praat, kan ek jou goed verstaan. So yeah, I'm just yeah, we should understand the languages we speak are similar. Yeah, so I think the previous comment basically showed there was a relationship with the pagan people and this new budding religion, and there definitely was also a Christian influence within that, right? And on that score, it is illegal under Islamic law to criticize Muhammad, to bring shame or to bring disrepute on Islam. It is actually illegal and it's punishable by death. It is called Sab al-Rasul, okay, to insult the Prophet. The doctrine of the law of Sab al-Rasul is covered by Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. You'll find it in this book, The Unsheathed Sword Against the One Who Insults the Messenger. Notice it says the messenger, not Allah, the messenger.
Yeah.
Okay.
But this, so Lloyd, sorry, that makes so much sense because you know all these countries that uphold blasphemy, and I'm specifically looking at Pakistan here, they care more about you blaspheming against Muhammad than Allah per se. To be honest, it seems like that's where their hang up lies, is you can still get by if you kind of say something against Allah, but you say one word against Muhammad and all the hell of that blasphemy law will come down on you.
Let's read this. You can see, read what you see on the screen.
The first issue, whoever insults the Prophet is to be killed, whether they are Muslim or a disbeliever. Wow. The second issue, killing is prescribed on him, the one who insults the Prophet, and it is not permissible to imprison or show favor to him or to ransom him. So death is the only answer to this. Wow. Third issue, any Muslim or non-Muslim who insults the Prophet is to be killed and repentance is not sought from him. That's crazy because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but in some instances where some people are charged for blasphemy, they do Islamically sometimes give them 3 days to repent. As a Muslim, you can take your words back.
So, look, I don't want to get, don't want to deviate too much, but just
Sure.
briefly on Islamic law. There are four major schools of Islamic law. All the other schools are considered to be heretical schools, right? They can be dismissed, right? John Stockton, also cool. So all the other schools, so they're only the four major schools: Hanafi, Hanbali, Maliki, and Shafi, right? Those are the four schools. The rest can be dismissed. They do not count, and under strict Sharia, right? Those people would be considered heretics, and they would well be killed. Right now, unfortunately, because not everyone can be a perfect or good Muslim, there are differences within these four schools, but they're not four separate religions. So the differences is harmonized. There was a scholar called Al-Shar'ani who wrote a book called The Supreme Scales, right? The
Right.
Great Balance of the Supreme Scales, okay? The Mizan al-Kubra. So he was the scholar that harmonized the differences between the four religions, and this became the doctrine that the scholars used to interpret why the four schools are different. And this range of differences is developed in a doctrine called azima and rukhsa. Azima
Right.
is strictness. Okay, rukhsa is technically it's called dispensation, but it really means to relax the rules. And then there are other rules within Islam, within Islamic law, that modify how you do this. So you can, in fact, quite literally within Islamic law, you can break every single Islamic law if you feel there is a need. So there's
Oh.
literally nothing that is sacrosanct in Islamic law that cannot be violated. There is not a single rule in Islam that cannot be violated if you feel it is necessary. And that's an entirely subjective decision. So,
Yes.
so a strict Muslim, he's following azima. Those who are not strict are following rukhsa. So they might do totally opposite things, but both of them earn reward from Allah because they are following the doctrine within the Sharia. So this book concerns the Islamic ruling upon those who insult the final prophet, Muhammad. Okay? And let's have a look at what they say within the text. The
Okay.
objective of this work is to clarify the Islamic ruling on this subject. That's the Sharia. They are to be killed even if they pay a protective tax in a Muslim state, if they're a dhimmi.
Jeez.
And okay, so we've already got this. The one who insults Muhammad is killed, whether Muslim or non-Muslim. Sharia law applies to non-Muslims as well, right? So let's go here. So let's look at the first ruling. Whoever insults the Prophet is to be killed, whether Muslim or non. This is the view of the scholars. The scholars have consensus. Now, consensus is critical. Islam is not peaceful, it is a war religion. So the scholars have consensus called the ijma. Now, the ijma
Yeah.
is the orthodoxy, right? It's what they all agree upon. Now Muslims will tell you, apologists will tell you that, look, we don't agree on everything. Sure. About 20% of things they disagree on. Like, for
Mhm.
instance, we pray with our hands up here, others pray with their hands at their waists. Does that change Islam? That is purely cosmetic, right?
Yeah.
So the one guy, so the one guy prays with hands up here, the other guy prays with his hands at his navel. That doesn't change the orthodoxy of Islam in any way. That is purely a cosmetic change.
True.
They agree on most things, and these are the things that are fundamental to Islam. So the scholars have consensus that whoever insults Muhammad is to be killed. Malik, Layth, Ahmad, Ishaq, and Ash-Shafi also said this. The four primary scholars within Islam are called the Mujtahids Mutlaq, the absolute scholars, the infallible, perfect scholars. Their understanding is perfect. They can make no mistakes. And that's a longer story. The Muslims have unanimous agreement upon killing whoever insults Muhammad. It is the ruling that whoever insults other than him is to be lashed. This consensus is the consensus from the Tabi'un and the companions of Allah's Messenger. Right? Let's have another. So we'll continue just to see if this is an accident. There is consensus upon the obligation of killing such a person. They have consensus that whoever insults Allah or rejects anything from what has been revealed by Allah, such a person is a disbeliever. I don't know anyone who differed concerning the obligation of killing such a person. Scholars have consensus that whoever insults the messenger who attributes a defect to him, who does not consider Muhammad perfect, such a person is a disbeliever. You are
Oh
insulting Muhammad
my
and you are
word.
to be killed.
I mean, to
You
be
want
honest, the reason I'm even more shook is because there's certain hadith that says even if you call Muhammad like, black or dark skinned, that is considered insulting him. So this
to?
goes and you could die for that, but that's so problematic in itself.
Yeah.
What's being said here, what the overall message is, and then the punishment, and again, the subjective nature of this, but some of these ridiculous things like that, like commenting on his skin color, is enshrined in Islamic sources.
That is the law. That is the law. That is
Yeah.
Allah's law for all time. It is the, the permanent, eternal word of Allah. Right.
Atheist
So
Republic Cape Town is saying, yeah, but no, but we're moderate Muslims.
for now, remember, you're following Rukhsa. When do you switch to Azima? That is the problem. Let me show you something something else that's important here. You see, Muhammad, if you go into his biographies, what they call the biographies, it's a euphemism. It's really his gospels. They compete with the gospels of Jesus. It's the New Testament of Muhammad, if you want to see it that way.
Yeah.
Okay. This is where this okay, so this is incumbent upon Muslims. You must love the Prophet more than all people. The Prophet said, none of you believes until I am more beloved to him than his wife, his child, his life, and all people. See, now this is taken from the Bible. If you go, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength. You shall
Mhm.
love the Lord your Muhammad more than your wife, more than your children, more than your own life. You must be willing to give your life in jihad. You must love him more than everything in your life and all other people. You see, I thought Muhammad was
Complete
just an example
dedication
to
and
follow.
sacrifice. Yeah.
This is, you have to love Muhammad. You have to hold him above anything and everything. See,
This is
this
beyond
is what
being an example now, right? This is complete deification of the man.
correct. And if you go into the Sirah, you go into the Gospels of Muhammad, you will see he is deified. He is deified. He exists before creation. He was with Allah. In fact, the world and the universe was made by Allah for Muhammad. Muhammad is the
Wow.
light of Allah. Muhammad is the essence that Allah used to create the world.
Wow. Yeah.
You
And
didn't know
light
that,
is attributed to Allah and Muhammad and Gabriel, I think, isn't it? They all have,
correct?
yeah,
It's the nur, but don't
it's
forget,
the
remember,
moon.
as I told you before, it's the nur. It's not the sunlight, it's the moonlight.
It's the
The light of
moonlight.
Allah, the nur, and the light of Muhammad is the moonlight. Why
Wow.
moonlight?
Notice a theme? Um,
All right. So
Sorry,
yeah,
just before we continue, Doorknob Head is another regular, so thank you so much for your support. Doorknob Head is saying donation to this channel in the name of Raj B. Thank you, Raj B, for your donation to this channel. In other news, I finally caught up. Thanks 2 times speed. Interesting. Interesting alternative hypothesis to the Petra hypothesis. Thank you so much, Rajbi and Dornoped, for both your donations. And yeah, as Lloyd said, most of the focus has been on Petra and like Northern Arabia and things to that regard. But he's now taking the focus down to Southern Arabia with a heavy emphasis on Ethiopia and Yemen, and then kind of connecting how all of that meshes together to lead its way into Islam. But if you wanted to comment on that, Lloyd, go ahead as well.
yes, certainly. Look, it's not that I'm discounting the Petra hypothesis. It's certainly valid. There is validity to it. There is validity to the north. I'm just filling in the blank, which was the south and Africa, and I'm going to be connecting those two. So it doesn't reject any of that scholarship. It simply just adds another piece to that puzzle.
Amazing. Yeah, it's just kind of like building the picture up more and adding pieces to this puzzle. And you stand back and you see the grand picture of Islam. So, yeah, you're caught up just at the right time. We are right in the midst of the Hilal crescent, and we'll let Lloyd carry on.
Excellent. So yeah, so we've now talked about the Hilal, right? The name of a pagan Arabian moon god of the crescent, and it's connected with Sin, the Babylonian deity Sin, and Ishtar, Venus. All right. So now let's have a look at the Hilal, the crescent, Islam's symbol. You'll see it here. Now you notice the Ottomans, for some reason, in 1843, decided they would add this to make it the official flag of Islam. Well, maybe those imams knew something that the average Muslim doesn't, you see? So, yeah. Wow. You have some people like you. They seem to like your channel.
Well, Dawn of Head was clarifying from what we said and said, oh, if it's additional information, even better. Yeah, that's why I thought it was absolutely paramount that we get Lloyd on, because currently we see YouTube channels doing this, but you just see people veering off into different segments. If we can get the full picture together like this, that's amazing. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. And Jaspal Bhamra, thank you very, very much for your super chat. And feel free to ask a question in the super chat. I'm guessing you didn't have a question, but I appreciate your support nonetheless. And I hope I said your name correctly. But yeah, thank you. Sorry, Lloyd, back to you.
No, you're fine. It's no, please go ahead and take your time. Um,
Thanks.
Yeah, it saves my voice as well. So I did a lengthy show last night, and I have another one tomorrow. So I've got like
A
different
massive
channels
hats
I've been
off to
invited.
you. I can imagine. And you need to spread this info far and wide. So hats off.
Well, thank you. So yeah, so have a look at this symbol. So this Islamic symbol, it goes way back to pagan times, BC. It goes back BC, right? It goes. So notice again here the same symbol: crescent, star, star. You see the crescent here. Sorry, you see the crescent. This is a
Mm.
pagan temple. This is the fire, right? This is the
Yeah.
pagan fire worship. Okay, so have a look at these coins, and the symbol is found in the Parthian Empire on the coins of Phraates the Fifth, right? This is around the turn of the millennium, right? So
Mhm.
2,000 years ago. The star
Wow.
represented either Zoroastrian divinity Mithra or the divinity Tishtria, right? So this was Mithra worship, right? The star and the crescent became an emblem of the Parthian kings when it was adopted by the rulers of the Sasanian Empire. The Sasanians were then conquered by, these were the Persians, that were then conquered by the Arabs. So at
Wow.
one time,
Okay.
they, right? In the Sasanian period, the star and the crescent was shown with the explicitly Zoroastrian elements. Okay, the coins display a portrait of the king surrounded by the symbol, right? He's got a couple of crescents around you. You see a crescent, 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 right? And there's a portrait of the king surrounded by the symbol, and on the reverse, there's a picture of a fire altar with attendants as well as the crescent, right? And when Muslim Arabs conquered Persia in the 7th century, the Sasanian coin designs were preserved. They kept the coin designs, okay? And reformist
Mm.
Caliph Abd al-Malik, now you'll notice if you watch especially Jay Smith's channel, Vanda Films, you'll see he speaks with Abd al-Malik a lot. But Abd al-Malik,
Yes.
this originates in Yemen, right? It originates in Yemen from the Muqarribs. I mentioned that word earlier, and we'll go into that in detail at some point. Lots of
Okay.
detail. It's very important. But Abd al-Malik is a title. You're the slave of the king. Now, Malik, just so you know, just to give you guys a bit of a hint here, the Arabic, this is the triliteral root. It's common to Semitic languages like Hebrew, and that's MLK, right?
Mhm.
M-L-K, right?
Yeah.
MLK, Martin Luther King, right?
Mhm.
Malik means king, okay? It's got different spellings. We do see it like Melek, Melek. I mean, whatever. It's all the same. It's Melek, right? The king. It means king. If the king, right? If Abd al Malik, who is the king, the emperor, if he is the slave of the king, if the king, it's not a name. Remember, Abd al Malik is not a name. It is a title. Okay. You would
Yes.
be Abd al
True.
Malik Nuria. I would be Abd al Malik Lloyd,
Yes.
right? The slave of the king. But if you are the emperor, if you are the king, whose slave are you? Well, you're the slave of Allah, right?
God.
The
Yeah.
God that you
Mm.
serve. You serve the God, right? Malik is the root word of a god we all know and love called Moloch, slave
Okay.
of Molech. See,
Yeah.
Molech. You may have heard of Molech. People sacrifice children to him.
Okay.
This was the pagan god that
God.
within the Bible,
Yeah.
God was very offended, and he had these people destroyed for the fact that they were completely immoral and they were sacrificing their children to Molech.
Mhm. Okay.
Okay, so look, we'll get into that in detail, right? So now what you've got is this fire thing.
So sorry, Lloyd,
Okay, so
just to
this was
interrupt you there for a quick second. So you're saying that Abdul Malik even is derived from the word Molech there, the god.
it's one of the
It's
the
one of the
roots. Okay,
derivations. Okay, it's
it's
one of
one
the
of the
roots.
derivations. Yeah, Malik means king. However,
Okay.
you see, within the Hebrew, and remember the Jews came first, right, with their religious ideas, and clearly Islam borrowed from those ideas. They stole from everything. They, from different periods, different geographies, as they conquered, they absorbed these ideas and modified. They wanted to
Mhm.
appeal to everybody. They wanted to seem ecumenical or something. But
Mhm.
understand, okay, I'll give you an example. We will cover this much later, but I want to give an example of how these words work. So the root, the triliteral root, SLM, okay? Muslims are very keen to tell you it equals salam, which means peace,
Yeah.
okay? They'll tell you SLM equals Islam, which means peace.
Mhm.
No, no, it means submission. Oh, yes,
So-
sorry, I don't know how I got this wrong. It means submission, okay?
Yeah,
Understand, you get that a lot. That happens a lot. So that's SLM.
totally.
What they forget to tell you is that, remember, Islam dates from technically the 7th century, properly speaking, the 9th is when they started using this terminology. Before that, they were just the mu'mineen. And that's another
Mm.
interesting word to explore. But prior, so this is 3 and this is 4. What's the original use of SLM? Well, SLM originally was the god Shalim, star god Shalim. Two,
Wow.
yes, the star god Shalim. Okay, and before that, you'll notice that the root SLM, the triliteral root SLM, means, let me see, graven idol. Thou shalt not make thee graven idols and bow down and worship them. 10 Commandments. Thou
Indeed.
shalt make no
Yes.
graven idols. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Graven
Yeah.
idol.
Wow, wow, wow. Okay. This is
They
mental.
just forget to add that little bit.
I mean, yeah, just missed the little minute detail there, which changes absolutely everything. Wow. Okay. So will we come back to this and see how this obviously
We
kind of
will,
takes shape? Okay.
yeah, probably in the
Awesome.
third. If you're kind enough to invite me back, if your audience doesn't think I'm terrible, then we'll go into detail on this in probably the third show. So let me
Okay.
continue.
Yeah,
Hopefully
sorry.
that's interesting. Though.
We have
Yeah.
one question for you, Lloyd, if that's okay. In the meantime, Stop Scamming Man. Thank you so much again for your super chat and your question. I have heard academics argue that Molech was totally fabricated by the Old Testament. Do you have any comments on that?
I can prove that Julius Caesar, Shakespeare, and no, not Shakespeare, Julius Caesar, and a number of major historical figures that we all believe in are all totally fabricated because there's only like a handful of scripts, of written artifacts that prove their existence. Now, the Bible has like 30,000 different, at least 30,000 different manuscripts that attest to the Bible historically. Now, if you take the Homer's Iliad, I think there's only like 5 documents that have different versions of the Iliad. On that basis, these things are complete fabrications because they don't exist, because there's not enough evidence to prove them. Understand? So you've got literally the world's most attested historical document. It's a collection of documents, not one book. It's a historical. So look, on that point, no, I'm not a historian in that fashion that I can say yes or no. However, multiple cultures outside of the Bible attest to the worship of Molech and all of these gods. So this is not something that is isolated just to the Bible. It's something that you find in multiple cultures. The Assyrians and so on, they all talk about this god, Molech. Okay. And in fact, you might look for Molech and not find it because he also happens to have other names like Baal.
Mm.
And you can associate him with the god of the Kaaba, which is you would know as Hubal. And Muhammad happened to be consecrated to Hubal. We'll get into all of that in the future. So I can, again,
Okay.
all of the notes, all of my papers, all of the academic work, I will provide that folder. You can go through it at your leisure. Everything that I have,
Awesome.
you can go through at your leisure.
Stop
So,
Simon. I hope that answered your question. Thank you, Lloyd, for that comment. And yeah, I'll give literally let you take hold again because I do realize we have 10 minutes left of this 2-hour stint, so it's all yours.
Cool. Yeah, let's see where we are and let's see how far we can get. Okay, fine. So let's just continue from here. So when Muslims conquered Persia in the 7th century, right, Sasanian coin designs were preserved. They kept the coin designs. This is a Muslim design here. Notice it kept this little crescent and star design. They decided to hang on to that. Okay.
Yes.
They
They
didn't get rid
didn't
of it.
do
They said,
they
hey,
didn't do away
this is
with it at
familiar.
all. Yeah.
Yeah, they kept it right there, right on top, crescent and star. You can see the star right there.
Yeah.
Lovely little 5-pointed star right there. Okay. And so Abd al-Malik replaced the fire altar scene with Arabic text, but he kept the stars and crescents. And then it
Okay,
appeared in later in
okay.
Quran.
Right. So the fire altar has now disappeared. The star and the crescent are still there, and now we have Arabic text.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, just on the reverse side
Yeah.
and the front side. So yeah. So right. So the crescent
It's
is
literally, sorry,
approximately
Lloyd, like the tip of the mosque minarets even today, and the exact way it's positioned is literally like that second coin there, the third one especially. It's just
totally.
uncanny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Muslims like to say, look, man, this is the Ottomans did this. Blame it on the Ottomans. And you know what? The Ottomans got it from the Byzantines. Well, they forget to tell you it's from the pagan Byzantines, but that's a slight technical oversight. So Muslims argue that this crescent and star is the popularized symbol of the Ottoman Islamic Empire. Others state that it is a pre-Islamic pagan deity, a moon god. Fine, so that's the debate. Now, religious symbols are historically and theologically significant. The cross is linked to the crucifixion of Christ Thus, it is logical that the crescent moon has a historical and theological meaning for Islam.
Yes, sir. Indeed.
So Islam claims to be the original, true, monotheistic religion of Abraham. So let's have a look. So these are all, now oddly enough, these are from Haran in Turkey. These are
Okay.
from the 1st century and sooner. So understand
Wow.
the Turks had been hanging around with this crescent and star a lot longer than 1843.
For a lot longer than that. Yes. Wow.
Yeah, for at least
Going.
1,843 years sooner than 1843. The Turks have been
Yeah.
hanging around with this symbol.
So don't be blaming the Ottomans anymore. Here it
Yeah.
is.
Okay, so here you can see here's a pagan Byzantine coin. That's a pagan Byzantine coin, right? And here we've got Baal Hadad, other versions of Baal, right? And you've got the Hittite crescent moon as well,
Wow.
right? So this
Okay.
goes back to all of these pagan cultures. So they believe that they are the true monotheistic religion of Abraham.
Yes, a
And we now have
massive
to
claim
talk
they
about the word,
make.
the word Hanif. Now, what we can do is we can end off here. What I'll do is I'll do this slide and I'll jump forward to another slide that just adds evidence to this, right?
Sure.
But Hanif, the plural word is Hunafa. And don't forget, within the Quran, Allah is Hanifan. Allah says, I am Hanifan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? This is in the Quran. Allah says, I
Yeah.
am Hanifan. Muslims originally, before they became Mu'mineen, they were the Hanif. They were the Hanifa. You get Abu Hanifa, one of the great imams, right? So in Islamic writings, this is one who follows the original and true monotheistic religion, which is Islam, right? In the
Yeah.
Quran, Hanif is used especially of Abraham. Abraham was Hanif. Muhammad was Hanif. Islam is Hanif. Allah himself is Hanif. Okay? And this is from the Encyclopedia of Islam, volume 13, by the way. I will link all
Okay.
of that.
Thanks.
I'll provide all that. Islamic usage occasionally uses Hanif as the equivalent of Muslim, and the Hanafiya are the religion of Abraham or Islam. Okay? So
Yeah.
Allah himself is Hanifan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Allah himself makes that claim. So Hanif in Arabic, right? That's the word. In Hebrew, that's the word. It's an Arabic masculine name. It means righteous person or true believer. In Islam, okay, within Arabic today, that's its current meaning. It is agreed that Hanif is derived from the Syriac word Hanpe, meaning heathen or pagan.
Wow. Wow. Because I mean, look at the absolute dichotomy in this, attributing that to Allah himself and Abraham and righteous person, where the literal derivation means pagan or heathen,
Yes.
the absolute opposite of what Islam manifests and claims to be.
So in the historical writings, the Christians and the Jews call the Muslims Hanif. They say you are pagans, you are heathens, you are heretics. You are heretics, right? However, the Muslims then turned around. Now, look, the word Christian was first a curse that was a pejorative used against Christians. They said, oh,
Right.
you are the followers of Christ, you are the Christians. And the Christians eventually said, hey, the shoe fits, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happened is here the same thing. They were called Hanifan, and they said, yeah, we are. And then they took it on as a positive term, whereas the enemies obviously had originally used it in a negative term. What is odd, though, is that the Muslim scholars also use the term Hanifan as a derogatory term to describe star and moon worshippers. So
Okay.
they use
Sorry.
the term, they say, we are Hanifan, we are
Yeah.
believers, okay? We are believers. However, the Muslims then turn around and they go to pagans and they say, you guys are Hanifan, you are pagans. So within the
Yes.
Islamic writings, they call pagans Hanifan, but they call themselves Hanifan as well.
Yeah, that is
Which is
really
an odd
interesting
contradiction.
because the fact that because you wouldn't even want the connotations of that linked back to yourselves, if that's the term you're using derogatory for them. Do you know what I mean? That is
Yeah,
weird to kind of accept that word on both levels like that.
yeah.
But I don't
It's
want to cover that last point of your PowerPoint. So Abdurrahman, I do want to say thank you so much for your super chat. Abdurrahman is saying great work, Lloyd. So whether you were speculating on whether people are enjoying this or not, I very much think we have our answer. People are really enjoying this. I just want to give a special shout out as well to Derek from Myth Vision. He's here in the live chat. Thank you so much for stopping by, Derek. This is actually right up your street, so thank you for being here. And Derek is saying this is really interesting stuff. So yeah, thank you, and I hope you enjoy. And this is going to be one part of a massive thing. We're going to break it down slowly. So I'll let
Yeah.
Lloyd wrap up today's, because I know there's
Yeah,
a
so
couple
I'll
more
wrap
things you
up with
want to
this
tell us.
slide then if you want, and then you can take
Sure.
some questions and add your thoughts, and I'll leave the floor open to you. So I've just introduced, I haven't finished that section on Hanifa. We'll come back to that, but I want to go here quickly. I want to step ahead for a moment. So let's bring up this slide. So we're going to talk about, so to give you some brief background, in the Quran, the very first name of Allah, that Muhammad, because Allah has no name. Allah is actually a title, the God, right? It's generic. It's just a title. It's a title. Just like Abdul Malik is a title. It's not a name, right? Allah. Now, don't forget the Arab Christians were also using the term Allah for the God, but it wasn't a name. It was a title of the God because the Christian God has a name. The Jewish God has a name, Yahweh,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And now, the very first time that Allah is given a name in the Quran is in chapter 49 or chapter 59, right? Where Muhammad goes, "Oh, hey, good grief. My God doesn't have a name. I've just been calling him this dude, the Lord." He
Yeah.
was just calling him the Lord.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Lord doesn't have a name. He's the anonymous God, the God with no name, right?
True. Yeah.
And Muhammad goes, "Oh yeah, amnesia. So I've got to fix that." And so he calls Allah for the very first time. He calls him Rahman, the
Mm-hmm.
merciful.
Mm-hmm.
What is interesting is that the Christians and the Jews of that era, from the 4th century, had been calling the God, the Christian God and the Jewish God of the Bible, they'd been calling him Rahman. There was, yes, they'd been calling God Rahman. This was his name, right? And
Okay.
also, there was a false prophet called Musaylama, who was a competitor of Muhammad's, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was also preaching a monotheistic religion. I know, monotheistic religion. So this guy, Musaylama, was competing with Muhammad. He was teaching a monotheistic religion, and the name of his God was, can you guess?
Brahman.
Yes, he was calling his God Rahman. So Muhammad, the great plagiarizer in chief, right?
Wow.
He decides, now let's have a look through this, okay? So let's have a quick read here. The upper classes of the Arab society went over to some form of monotheistic creed, a cult of the merciful Rahman,
Rahman.
often called
Wow.
Rahmanan, the Lord of Heaven, which could best be described as Hanafite. Okay? It is devoid of
Mm.
explicit marks of either Judaism or Christianity. At the same time, from the end of the 4th century, a few explicitly Jewish texts attest an influential Jewish presence in the 6th century under Abraha, where Christianity prevailed. Okay, Abraha, this is the guy who went on his elephants. And of course, the lead elephant, just so you know, Abraha goes, okay, so these elephants attack Mecca, right? Because they're unhappy, right? With Muhammad, they go attack. No, Muhammad, that's the year of the elephant when Muhammad was born, 570, supposedly. So Abraha, he was sent, okay, remember the Jewish king, the supposed Jewish king of Yemen was killing the Christians, harassing and persecuting. So the king of Yemen, the Christian king of Ethiopia, sends Abraha with a very large army and they conquer Yemen, they conquer much of Arabia, right? Abraha, he now stays in Yemen. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so now he gets word about this nonsense that's happening in Mecca, and he takes his elephants, but he first goes back to Ethiopia and he brings back a special white elephant. The name of that white elephant is, the name of that elephant is
Drum roll. What are we seeing here?
Mahmud, is a contraction of Muhammad. It's the root,
Wow.
Muhammad.
Yeah,
Okay, he
totally.
goes and fetches a white elephant, specially goes and sends for a white elephant, brings it from Ethiopia, comes back to Yemen, and now decides to invade Mecca. Okay, and Mahmud, the white elephant, gets to the outskirts of Mecca, and Mahmud the elephant refuses to go further and sits down, and all the other elephants follow, and Mahmud won't attack, and game over.
Yeah.
Okay, lovely story. But now let's have a look here. Okay, so Arabia, so they say here, Quran 53:49 calls Allah the Lord of Sirius. Sirius was the star god. Okay, the
Wow,
star
wow,
on the crescent.
yes.
Okay, Sirius is the star god. Now, the star god is the offspring, the children of the star of the sun and the moon. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
the moon is masculine, the sun is feminine. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
in Babylon, the moon is masculine, the sun is feminine. In other
So
cultures,
it's
the sun is masculine, the moon is feminine. But it's switched around in Babylon, and the same happens in Arabia for some reason. It's odd, just probably a sheer coincidence that Babylon and Arabia have the same concept of moon and sun, the same
mm-hmm.
genders. And of course, the sun is the star god, Ishtar. Okay, so also called Sirius, right? And the lord of Sirius is Al Makkah, Sin, right? And so if Allah is the Lord of Sirius, then Allah is Makkah, Allah is Sin, Allah is the Babylonian god,
Mm-hmm.
the head of the pantheon. And
Might
now
might this, Lloyd, I'm so sorry, might this be the ambiguous Yasin chapter in the Quran that people have
I would say
been
so, because that is supposed to be the main chapter of the Quran. It's the soul of
Mhm.
the Quran, the heart of the Quran. I'll let go. So let me finish this. I'll be 2 minutes and
Sure,
then I'll
sure,
call
sure,
it.
sure.
So the new monotheistic God is called Rahman, Rahmanan. Sometimes called Rahmanan in South Arabia, and he's described as the Lord of heaven and earth. And the Quranic name Al-Rahman is probably related to that. One interesting inscription, an archaeological inscription, ends after mentioning Rahmanan with the phrase Rabhad bin Muhammad.
Wow.
Okay, we've just seen the elephant was called Mahmud, which is a
Yeah.
diminutive of Muhammad. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and Mahmud is just a form of the name Muhammad. Rad had been Muhammad, which is translated as by the Lord of the Jews, by the highly praised.
Damn.
Okay, Muhammad is a
Yeah,
title, it is not a name. It means the praised
for the
one.
praised one. Yeah, exactly.
It is not a name, and this is in reference to the Christian and Jewish God, the God of the Bible. Now let's add a little bit more information. By the
Sure.
Lord of the Jews, not by the Lord of Islam, but the Lord of the Jews.
Yeah.
Okay, by the highly praised. Let's have a look. So this inscription, let's have a look, the final one here. The inscription ends with the invocation in the name of Rahman and of his son, the conquering Christ. Rahman, Christos. Okay, Christos.
Wow.
Abraha,
Yes.
hold on, we just read about Abraha. Abraha's inscription contains clear formulas, which begins with the power, the help, and the mercy of Rahman, of his Messiah, and of his Holy Spirit. God the Father, God the Son, God the
Oh,
Holy Spirit.
spirit.
It
Yeah.
recounts a Christian celebration.
Oh, wow. There you go. Okay. So the So with this, sorry. First of all, there's because
Yeah.
there's a lot of information to unpack here, right? There's the Muhammad's rival prophet who was also knocking about, and then Rahman was taken by Muhammad from him to give his Lord a name because thus far it had just been your Lord, thy Lord, blah 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 to that effect. And now
Mhm.
you look at actually where Rahman comes from and what it's actually referring to,
It's
and
Jesus.
we've got the Messiah and the Holy Spirit. Exactly. And it so this is a sheer really bad looking over cheat, like copying a line or two from your friend's exam, moving it over to yours and slapping it wherever you have blanks, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And there's a lot more of this. It doesn't just, this is just, this whole presentation is about 8 hours long. So to cover all of it. So
Wow.
yeah, guys.
So, no, I think honestly that was a lot of knowledge and truth bombs dropped on us today. So I do really appreciate that, Lloyd. And I know there's a lot of
Thank
material
you.
you have to uncover, and it's hard to do that in a concise way. But I really, today, I think you've just set the scene so well. Like I'm starting to kind of like visualize and be able to watch this narrative play out and what you're describing in terms of Southern Arabia. And it just lends to, as you said, what we know so far and what we can contemplate and meditate on about the Petra theory and all of that. As you start to put this information together, the picture becomes clearer and clearer. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I think this was very insightful today. Derek, thank you so much for your super chat. Derek says, just showing some love to an ex Muslim queen for being inquisitive and making it look good. Oh, thank you. That is very sweet. Yeah, I thought it was about time that we take a leaf out of your channel's book and kind of delve into the history and like the pagan roots and all the mythicism that's kind of been embellished into Islam. Even though we're supposed to see Islam through this strictly Abrahamic monotheistic lens, you realize that's not the case, as you definitely do know as well, Derek. But yeah, guys, I'm sure everybody that's listening knows about Derek and Myth Vision, but if you don't, please go and check out his channel because what we've done here today is literally what Derek does on the daily, and he does it across the board, and it's really interesting. So if you're into myths and history of this kind, Derek is definitely your man. So yeah, thank you again, Derek. Also, I do have a question for you, Lloyd, that's come through to me on my phone. Is it
Mhm.
okay if I pose this question to you before we...
Sure, I guess so. Yeah.
Okay. So the question is, Lloyd, do you know which is the oldest proven Hadith manuscript we have, and the oldest biographies of Muhammad? The oldest manuscript we have found and which we have evidence for, I think, is the question to you.
The oldest Sirah technically should be Ibn Ishaq Ibn Hisham, right? However, it
Yeah.
was written about 200 years, 150 years after the death of Muhammad, and it was edited. So I believe Ibn Hisham wrote it, and then it was edited, redacted. A lot of it was stripped out by Ibn Ishaq, if I recall. Or it could be the other way around. And what you find is that all of the Sirah post that document start to add more detail. They embellish and add more detail, which was not present in the original. So when you go, the earlier you go back, the less information you have. But somehow, as you come forward in time, they suddenly start adding details that's not possible to get with that. And the earliest, there's a guy called Motsky, Harold Motsky, I believe is his name. He does speak of a very early collection of hadith, which dates back to about a century after Muhammad. But the Kitab al-Sitta, which are the 6 books, which is derived from the Jewish concept of the Talmud, because the Sharia is just a duplicate of the Talmud. It's the Islamic Talmud. It's their version of the Talmud. Just as people don't like the Talmud, well, most people don't understand the Talmud.
I love the way you call it the Muslim Talmud as well. I just think that that's so much better
It
because
is.
you're exactly so no nice one. You're Daif Bukhari, Daif Muslim, and the Muslim Talmud. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, so the Jews had 6 canonical books within their Talmud as well, called the 6 books. So the Muslims, when you read Kitab al-Sitta, just translates as the 6 books. So that is literally a carbon copy from the Jewish practice. And those date to 200 years after the death of Muhammad, right? Now, of course, I mean, we cannot take anything in the Islamic narrative literally or for granted. We have to question everything, right? But I mean, we also need to work within the standard narrative as an outline to work off of, right? So yeah, those are very late, and also within Islam, they have a very different concept of proof. Just to answer something before I forget, you mentioned Petra. The gods Alat, Manat, and Al Uzza were the primary gods of Petra.
True.
So you cannot discount Petra because they were the primary gods of Petra as well. But within these stories are very late, but proof means something different in Islamic law. You've got the ilm, the sciences of Islam, the Islamic sciences. These are not sciences the way that we view them in the Western world as experiments or a methodology to find truth. Okay, Islam has a completely different view of truth, has a different view. So proof is speech that sounds good, speech that is delivered in a way that sounds beautiful, and it is forceful language.
Mellifluous and forceful, yeah.
Yeah. That is their view of proof. I'd have to go into the Shariat and look in the definition to show people that, but they have a very different definition of proof, and they don't believe in written text. They believe in oral transmission as the primary, as superior to that. And of course, conveniently, you can't prove anything from oral tradition. It's all broken telephone.
Touche. Yes, exactly. But yeah, thank you so much. I hope that did answer the question that you had regarding the oldest evidence and the earliest Islamic sources that we have. I saw another question on here about Saudi Arabia and archaeological evidence, but I feel like we can hold that for a later part because we will be getting closer to
pose
that.
the question. I can always do some research and then come back to that.
Okay, sure. Well, it was just let me try and find it. It was earlier, and it was just to do with, is this anything to do with why Saudi Arabia are trying to basically concrete all over Mecca and not let any archaeologists excavate? So I think that was...
So according to the Hadith, according to the early collections that they don't advertise very heavily, the Kaaba is where, okay, so apparently mankind was very tall when they were made. Adam was 90 foot or 36 meters tall, according to Islamic tradition, right? So what happens is that Adam was 90 feet tall, 36 meters, and mankind grew shorter with every generation until today, right? But of course, there's no evidence of this, mankind shortening throughout history, right? You don't have that. But also, Adam is buried next to the Kaaba, okay, along with 70 to 300 prophets who are buried in an attitude of prayer. And according to Islamic tradition, prophets do not decompose.
Yes.
Okay, so there are up to 300 prophets all buried next to the Kaaba. Right? Now you've got 300 prophets, non-decomposed, in an attitude of prayer, plus the 90-foot skeleton of Adam, all buried next to the Kaaba. One radar screenshot, and Islam has proven we're all going to say Shahada like that. Islam wins.
Exactly.
But somehow they fail to provide that proof to us. I'm not sure why.
Yeah. And how simple is that with today's modern like day technology? We don't even necessarily have to excavate, that there's other ways
Just
if you want.
X-ray. Oh, I mean radar. Yeah.
Exactly. And the world will believe you. If the world will see these intact bodies and a giant skeleton of Adam perfectly preserved, show us. Don't do the opposite and cover it all up and build these gigantic
Because
hotels and
there's no
Rolex
evidence for
towers.
Mecca before the beginning of the late 9th century. Beginning of the 9th century is the earliest evidence of Mecca.
Exactly.
Didn't exist. Or if it did exist, it was unimportant. It was irrelevant.
Yeah, and exactly. And it makes so much sense today with the glimpses of history that you've shown us and what was actually happening in the nearby geographical vicinity. So yeah, Derek is launching an Islamic scholarship video, guys, as soon as this live ends, which is basically now. So do head over there and check it out. Derek, I will definitely be tuning in and having a watch of that. So thank you so much for letting me know. And Claudius, cheers so much for your super chat and your appreciation. Claudius is saying, thanks to both of you for this very informative work. I will have to pass that mantle on to you, Lloyd, because you are, you're literally, you're just like a shining light when it comes to unraveling this in this depth. And the knowledge that you have, these questions you're basically able to answer, whether it spans like centuries and different empires, and then even the way you discuss and your knowledge of like Arabic root words and derivations. It's not normally something that one man can, is all encompassing, if you will. As a hang up of Allah is you literally are, I'm telling you, a bank and a wealth of knowledge. So I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with my viewers and coming onto my platform and taking up this invitation. And Derek is also saying, great work, Lloyd.
Thank
Keep
you.
going, brother. So yeah, John Stockman is also saying, guys, this stream still needs 2 upvotes. Please push it beyond 100 peeps. Let's please. Oh, we got 100 come through, so that's amazing. Thank you, John Stockman, as well, for always being a great mod and just massive support. I wanted to shed light on one thing. Dawn Ahmed was saying 60-foot tall, Adam. What was I think it is 90, isn't it?
90
What's
foot.
it?
90 foot
90.
tall.
Yeah, he
It's
is.
60 arms. So in the Quran, it's 60 arms. They call it arms, but it's 90 feet.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So just in case you needed that clarifying. So where is 90 foot Adam near the Kaaba? Please show us. But yeah, so thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Please do not forget to subscribe to Lloyd's channel. It is in the description. And if you want Lloyd to carry on being able to push all this information out there, you can also support Lloyd on PayPal and Revolut, which both links are in the description of this video. So also go down there and show some love, people. And yeah, so we can get Lloyd on next week and have him coming back to keep this going.
Nice.
So
yeah, I will provide my archive of books. I'll give you all of that that I've used, including the Encyclopedia of Islam, and I've got about 1,216 academic papers, books, and others that I draw from. Most of those will be in the references folder, so I'll give you guys the folder. Most of that is in that, so yeah, you guys will be able to look up this. Okay, thank you guys, thank you everyone, I appreciate it. Nuria, thank you.
Thank you. And there's Lloyd's channel again, guys, and just here. So please go ahead and subscribe. Thank you, everybody that tuned in today and watched, and for all your love and support and questions. I hope you all learned something. And yeah, until next time, take it easy, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Lloyd.